So let's see how we go today. Hey, so this is actually my first time with my equipment all hooked up. I've had this stuff for, I don't know, probably years, and finally had my boy hook me up and get it all set up and everything. So we'll see how things work today as we get people in. Since it's just me talking right now, I guess I don't really need these bad boys. But yeah, let's give her a go. So today's topic is I titled this "The Hard Right for the American W- the hard right the hard right for the American white." Um, and the idea is, race. No matter where you stand on the topic, it's been a part of America really since the beginning. So the idea is today, let's engage this topic of race from other points of view and how others see it. Uh, I've chosen a specific voicing that I've come across in my time that is based on uh, interactions. So it's about just the focus of you have never done. Let's just take that idea. You're a wake up, you do your morning routine, you go out, you work, um, you don't mess with people. Okay, uh, this is a person who is trying to get by in life. Okay, uh, they pay their taxes, or even if they don't pay their taxes, the point is they're not messing with people. So I argue this person on the front side has a valid uh, they have a valid stance when they say, "Hey, I don't mess with people." So you know why is this my thing? Why is this my focus? Why is this my concern? Things that don't directly deal with how I live my life. So that is definitely the idea of that person having to, feel that why do I from the extremes of trying to guilt white America to white guilt. That's the bigger picture. Media is trying to spin things. We're not going to try to get too big on that. We're going to zoom into the person who one on one. So I have I've been writing and talking publicly for quite a few years now. So I'm used to having feedback. Rather the feedback is personal, or if the feedback is through writing. So someone will send me a private message through a social media platform. I've experienced both, but recently, with the current events going on, it's become more. It's become more consistent, which makes sense in the fact that the topic is becoming more consistent for everybody. So uh, that's actually what we should expect. So the character or the persona, because keep in mind this, these conversation I'm about to have, it's not one person. So this is not one person who approached me, and because of this one person, I decided to go get on the mic. Uh, this is a persona um, of a collective idea based on numerous experiences, not just the numerous experiences I've personally had myself, but experiences that many people from the Black community have had. So to the point that we have conversations about this particular interaction. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the numbers here for some of the more prevalent, we're going to call them manifestations of this type of conversation. So I'm pulling up my list here so we stay on track. Because with any topic like this, it's very personal to people, has some personal aspects to it. It is very, very easy to let passions or emotions take sway. Now, I'm often accused of not being a fan of emotions or not believing in emotions. So before we dig into this, I want to just say very quickly, emotions are necessary. They're not an option, first off. They're not an option. As a human, you don't get to choose whether you have them or not. But I'll go even further and say that um, they are necessary for humanity itself, in my opinion. So even if we could all become Vulcans, I don't think we would like the outcome. Very many societies historically have maybe put on a pedestal the idea of stoicism, and sure, it has its proper place, which we could debate about separately on ethics and timing. But I will say that the idea of everyone being stoic is not an intriguing idea to me personally. So when I say something about emotions, usually what I'm talking about is the improper tool for the improper time. Earlier this week, I was hanging up some of my new big monitors so I can see what's going on around here when I'm doing these things. And um, I was spending about 15 to 20 minutes trying to trying to drill through a stud. I'd located the stud, I have my drill, I have the proper size bit, and I'm just going. And it's going and zzz, and I'm like, "Man, is my drill bad?" So I look, I check. No, you first check the battery. So I check the battery, battery's fine, full power. I then go back to drilling. I'm starting to smell smoke now, but I am not drilling through a normal old 2 by 4 piece of wood. And I'm like, "What is going on? Am I not pushing hard enough?" But you start smelling that smoke. Like, am I burning out the engine? What is going on? It probably took me 15 to 20 minutes to realize that I was using a masonry bit for drilling through wood. So, does that mean that because a masonry bit didn't go through wood, that masonry bits are useless? Absolutely not. A masonry bit has a certain purpose. Now, as the smoke was telling me, had I insisted, had I kept pushing, I actually could have got through with a certain amount of time. I could have got my whole board through. I could have got through with the masonry bit, but that's not what the masonry bit was ideally purposed for. So I say that to connect it to the idea that when you hear someone like me say facts over feelings, or you're mentioning your feelings, I'm asking you for evidence. It is hopefully, if I'm not being malicious, it is hopefully me saying that maybe for this particular business case or this particular project, that passions is not the best. We're going to talk about a very emotive topic that I'm sure to very different degrees it's going to hit people here, and it should. But for engaging, um, I argue that the tool that we should utilize is more of the logic and maybe even a little bit of ethics, if we can properly articulate where our ethics come from and what they mean. So, coming back to the person, I wake up in the mornings and I get letters from people, and by the way, I get a pretty good. So you're gonna get the person that says you're an idiot, you don't know anything, and I say, okay, whatever, move on with my day. But the majority of the contact is, you know, minorities saying, "Hey, you voiced something that I was feeling, but I couldn't ever voice myself. So you given me the words." I get that pretty often, and not just minorities like me, not just African Americans. I've spoken about topics for women, and I've had women say the same thing. Uh, but there's another group that let me keep going down the groups. I'll also get people who are not minorities, will write me and say, "I just want you to know you make me think about things I never thought about, and you make me consider things I thought I had settled in my mind from different ways." Which, by the way, that is what I allege is my main point. I'm not here to tell you what to think. My focus is mainly to help the social good, the social cause for us to all to get better tools for how to think. So coming back to it, I'm just trying to sell you a wider array of drill bits. I'm not trying to tell you what to do with the drill bit. That's not my lane. I'm just here to tell you that maybe you shouldn't use wood bit your projects. Maybe you shouldn't even try to use those. I think Bosch has them, those universal bits. For anybody in the trades, they're laughing right now because there's no such thing as a universal bit. You might get two out of the three or two out of four or something, but no, there is no bit that's just gonna, at least one you can afford, that's gonna go through your concrete, your masonry, your wood, and your steel. So that's really the idea here of here's some other tools you might want to consider taking with you along for the job. And what is the job? I've s- I argue that the collection of all these conversations that I have, the idea is, and I'm going to speak mainly for American society, for generations, families, individuals, kids growing up, soon to be professionals, they have been told, they've been told that if they want to be proper. If you want to do well in life, if you want to be a professional, if you want to be a proper adult as you grow from a child to an adult, there are these things you just don't talk about in public settings. The five that I list out are you don't talk about religion, sex, politics, income, or race. For me, though, if you tell people they can't talk about those five items, I argue that you've basically told people do not talk about the overwhelming majority of life. You're basically raising people to say, don't talk about life in public. I think it worked for a while, whatever worked means. But here's the problem you then gave everybody in the world, nearly, a cell phone. And this cell phone now connects everybody to everybody through social media platforms. To where before, if you were one entity or one person, you wanted to give a message to the world, you had to have power. You had to be in charge of the government or in charge of the newspaper or in charge of a media corporation to control messaging out to the public. You had to own the radio station or had the money to pay the radio station. So you had very few people with the ability to go one to many. Technology today has allowed many to many. And by that, anyone can talk to the world. You can go viral. You can have a message and it just goes out there. This was a power for the general public that before it wasn't there. The average person on the street, you had one to one. Maybe you said something that might not have been the best thing to say. It wasn't recorded. There was a reasonable expectation it wasn't recorded, and it was just within earshot. That's where it affected. Now today, You might remember the story. You can be on an airplane sending a random text and you're a nobody. You can send a tweet making a joke about how AIDS is only for Africans and get on a plane. And by the time you get off that plane, you've lost your job. And that tweet has been sent around the world and has millions of views, many to many. So let's take those two things together. You have raised people for generations to not talk about things, and then you've given them the power of governments, the power of media corporations to now talk to the world. Why are we so surprised that people don't really know how to talk to each other? Why are we specifically so surprised that people do not know how to have a conversation about race, religion, politics, sex, or income? Why is this surprising? If you don't teach somebody a subject, why are you surprised they don't know that subject? So that is our endeavor here, to try to do what little part we can here and now and teach each other how to have a conversation. Now, conversation is like life. It conflict is a requirement. You cannot grow, you cannot mature without conflict. Even your body itself is at war with itself as you go through puberty and adolescence. So, one of the first things we must realize is conflict is a necessary part of life. So, a conversation or to conversate, but have rules that conflict is not allowed, you are basically doing what those five rules are, just more succinctly. You're saying, "Oh, I want to talk, but let's lay some ground rules out." Uh, there should be rules to conversation, but one of the rules should not be truncating what is talked about. You can talk about how it's presented. You can talk about when it's presented, but there should be a tolerance for conversation that is holistic. So, with that being said, let's jump right into it. So, the number one, I got a list of six here. So, here, the first one I get is from the person who tells me that they were raised in a place they experience racism until they met black people. Um, so let me just say it again. Someone saying I was raised in a place. Now, not always, but the majority of the time, they admit that where they come from, there was few, if any, black people. So they grew up in a part of the country, a place where there were no black people. Black people didn't exist. They only existed as an idea, or maybe as a janitor or something. Um, and they grew up in this beautiful place that was happy and everyone loved each other. And then they went to the city, or then they went to school. And that is when they learned about the evil of racism. And they learned about the evil of racism by whether it was middle school, elementary school, college, or even their first job after leaving the house. They tell this story to tell me that that is how they learned about racism, when some black kids chased them home from school and beat them up, or at their job when they were working the assembly line and the blacks wouldn't talk to them or associate with them. But before then, they were raised that everyone is equal. In fact, they would make it very explicit to say, my parents raised me to know, they told me everyone is equal. You're no better than anyone else. So that's the setup. A white person approaches me and tells me about growing up in a place with no racism. For me, I kinda start feeling really good the same way you feel really good when you're really into a Disney movie. It's a fantasy that I enjoy hearing about. It's awesome, it's something that all of us would want. But again, it's a Disney movie for me. That can never be my real life. That is that is even when I try to put myself in their shoes, it is the equivalent of me imagining myself a Disney princess. Imagining that I have all the pretty dresses and imagining that, my father runs the kingdom and everything. And sure, he's got to deal with all these administrators and everything and hear the people's complaints. But I basically just walk around my father's kingdom and pick flowers. Um, Now he makes me study very hard. I have to learn Latin and Portuguese and Spanish and French. And, you know, so my life isn't. This is the story I hear when a white person tells me about growing up in a place where racism didn't exist. I'm gonna tell you this right now. The blackest of the blackest places in America, where almost everybody is black, you still have to deal with racism. You still have to deal with the cop or the judge or the administrators or the DMV. These are things that you don't get to escape. Even if because your community as a whole is black, you have more shielding from it directly. You still see how the adults around you, the adults that protect you, you still see how they interact. You still see how they operate. You see all of this. You don't know what's going on, but you know something's going on. And so I argue for a minority, no matter where you are in this country, no matter when you were in this country, you very early on get a part of your personality embedded into you by your environment. And I name that asking the question, why? You learn very early that part of your life is going to be asking the question, why? The first time you go to school with a white kid and they say you are black, because, not every black family raises their children, points them in their face, and says, you're black. Just so you know that. So very often, you'll be a kid like me and you'll go to a school and one of the other little kids, you're 7, 8 years old, and one of the other little kids will just say, "You're black." And you'll say, "No, I'm not. I don't even know what that means." You look at your skin and you're like, "No, I know the color black. I memorized my crayons. This microphone is black. I'm not black. I'm kind of brownish, but I'm not black." No, 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 you're black. You get this education from the other kids at school. Now, is it all the kids? No. But how many kids does it need to be for you to get taught this? One. So when I hear about these stories, it doesn't mean they're not true. Well, let me talk about that first part. So we know it's true because, I mean, we can look at the demographics. The black population is usually densely around cities. Then from there, rural suburban areas, as things are changing very quickly these days. But out of the 3,000, I think 141 counties in the United States of America, um, you actually do have counties that have no African Americans on the census. That's an absolute thing. I challenge you to find a county with a single human being in it or more that doesn't have a white person. So I say it that way to cover, mountainous regions where no one lives there. So When I brought up the question why, what I hear a white person say is, "You grew up in a Disneyland place where you never had to learn to ask the question why." And this is very important. We're going to come to this as we go through the others. You didn't have to ask why. Nothing ever happened to you to where you had to ask why as an early kid. In fact, not only did it not happen to you to where you had to ask why, you never thought to ask why for the others. So you think about it. That person tells me that my parents raised me to treat everyone as an equal, to not look down on anyone. My parents raised me that way. I'm going to say that again. A person walks up to me and says, "My parents raised me and they told me you are not better than everyone else. Everyone is the same." You never thought to ask your parents why they're telling you that? Remember, there's the same person is saying there's no black people around. You don't have no black people around where you live. So if you don't have any black people around or any other people that are different from you, if everybody looks the same as you, why are your parents teaching you this story? Why are they teaching you this? Why are they saying that? I live in Wisconsin, and what you will find is this happens very often where people say, "I grew up in Midwest, here up in Wisconsin, in this county or that county." We have 72 counties here in Wisconsin. And individuals will say, "Hey, um, I I actually grew up that way. We had no issues, and my parents told me not to mess with anybody." And they'll either volunteer it or I'll ask, like, "Were there any black people around?" And they'll say, "No, no." That's what I'm saying. It was not a big deal. No one talked negatively about it. But yeah, there's no black people. But we didn't talk bad. And then I'll ask, why? Why was there no black people where you lived? And you remember, these are adults. Average age when I'm engaging, 35, all the way to 65, 70 years old. I'm having these conversations. So, you know, I would say the average person I engage this question with, is probably touching 50, 45 to 50. And I will ask them this question: why were there no black people where you lived? Now, for the record, I'm asking a question I know the answer to. There is not a single one of the 3,141 counties in America where they can provide evidence that when black people came, they were welcomed with open arms. In actuality, when you look for the evidence, you can find overwhelmingly that when that black wagon or beat up old Model T rolled in, or that broken mule and the family walking behind it, when they came into town, quite the opposite was done. You best keep on riding. Wisconsin has a very deep history of this, deep, deep history throughout the counties where um, if you came into town, you better get going. Now, the North loves to claim that this is just a Southern thing. They love to bring up Jim Crow, especially conservative side of the world. They love to tell you about Dixiecrats and Jim Crow, and in the South, they're just more direct. They call them sundown towns, meaning you better be out of town before the sun goes down. In the North, there was no warnings. People would just have their homes firebombed if they were even allowed to buy a home. So let's back up. So in the North, you just weren't allowed to buy a home. You'd just be prevented from buying a home. No one would rent to you. You just couldn't find a place. No one would sell you land. Um, a white realtor that even tried to sell you land would be blacklisted. They'd be shut down. It was made very abundantly clear you were not welcome. Keep moving. So Wisconsin has a very interesting history where it was one of the first places in America where ethnicities. When I said that, I mean like Scandinavians, the different Scandinavians, Dutch, Norwegians, Finnish, then your Germans, your Poles. They started This Wisconsin was one of the first places to where for their union halls and their churches, they started going to church together here in America. This is some of that forgotten history where white is a very new thing, and it's very new to America, really. So, and that's sticking with their own. That's what we have traditionally in America. Traditionally, it is in fact, you drive through my town of Kenosha right now, you can still see the remnants, and it's not remnants, you can still see that history. We have a Swedish American hall, that I drive by whenever I go to see my mom. You have an Italian American club. You have these things to where it's like, this is our place. Now, to be fair, at least to my knowledge, all the places I've seen, including the 2 I just mentioned, they're open to the public. Um, and they'll say that on the wall, open to the public. But that's not how these places started. They were basically for us, by us types of things. But yes, in America, I'd say starting around, call it 1920 through the 1940s, 1945s, you started seeing some interesting demographic trends here in America where w what we know as white today, they started, um, marrying across ethnicity. So, a German guy would marry an Irish girl, that kinda stuff. You started seeing that, and you start seeing churches that covered more than one ethnicity. So you started seeing this, and Wisconsin was one of the bids of this happening, one of this new trend. And for that reason, there is an understandable level of pride in places like Wisconsin that, hey, we accepted everybody, almost everybody. Because yes, Wisconsin showed that the Swede and the German and the Norwegian, they could go to church together, they could intermarry, and it was not a big deal. But what all these people were consistent on is no blacks in our unions, no blacks in our labor halls, and no blacks in our town, and no blacks in our churches. We're not even going to talk about intermarrying. So, what you have there is what I run into today, people who were raised just down. I mean, I'm talking mobs across the bridge, running blacks out of town, but raising their kids and to where their kids never saw this. It was never spoken of. It's not a very proud history. But if you look for Wisconsin, you can find this history. I'm talking like all the way through the 1970s, mobs of whites running preventing blacks from moving into the neighborhood, like lining up with bats and shovels. Um, they so this is embedded into the history and into the people. So really what you have here is you have this history, you have this result of this history. You have a present today where people are saying we're all at peace, but that peace was attained by residentially eradicating the race of African American from view. So coming back to the power of not needing to learn to ask the question why, I find that a little envy in that. I envy that as a white person in America, it's possible. Not everyone. It's possible to be white in America and make it to, I've been told, middle school. I've even told college or their first job, to make it that far before you see race or even notice that certain people are missing. So that's my first thought. My second thought is when they tell me that their parents raised them to not think they're better than anyone else, and they told them everyone is the same. I'm not going to speak for every black parent, but I will speak for the ones I've told this to. And I can tell you that no black family that has kids has ever disagreed with me on this. None of us were given that message by our parents. None of us black people were given that message by our black parents. Let me be more specific. None of the black people I've ever met were given the message by their black parents. You are no better than anyone else, and everyone is the same. I'm going to tell you the message that if the black parents gave their black children a message, this is the message they gave them. The message was, no one is better than you. You are not inferior. You are not less. No matter what anyone tells you. You hear the difference in the messages. One child is being told everyone is equal. One child is being told everybody's the same. The other child is being told you're not less than all the others, no matter what they say. This is a difference that people gloss over. Again, we play. Children are very smart, and we don't often give them the respect they deserve. I guarantee you there are some white kids, I wasn't there when it happened. I guarantee you there was a white kid that when someone said, "Hey, everyone's the same," and the kid's like, "Why are you telling me that?" And they did not get an honest answer. I guarantee you there was a white kid that asked after hearing, "Hey, you're not better than anyone else." Like, "Okay, I'm just sitting here eating my yogurt by myself. Why are you telling me that?" And they did not get an answer. Because I will tell you, when that black kid asked the question, "Why are you telling me that I'm not less than anybody else?" That parent gave an answer. That parent basically said, "Because they're coming. There will be people who will try to convince you you are less. These people exist, and they exist in enough numbers that as your parent, I have to prepare you because to not prepare you would be shirking my responsibility as a parent." That's how many of these people are out there. Black parents don't sit around saying, "I'm not going to talk about this because, that's just the Dixiecrats in the South, and that's the only time you got to worry about it." Now, I will say this, black parents try to avoid the topic the same way fathers or parents try to avoid talking about sex. Again, race, sex, politics, but there's a higher level of responsibility to where, and actually it's not higher. If you don't talk to your kids about sex, you increase the chances that they're going to do something that will affect their lives. So I argue it's not higher. It's just maybe the difference is your children have to partake in order for sex to change their lives, the consensual version at least. But as a minority, you don't have to partake in it for it to affect you. There's no choices that you have to make in order for it to happen. It's independent of what you do. Whether you decide to go to Harvard or whether you decide to live in a box, it's just something that you will engage eventually. So when I hear that lesson, I again ask myself, that is a byproduct of someone raised not needing to ask the question why. Because I would wonder why. Um, I would wonder why my parents are telling me that I'm not better than other people if I've never done anything to justify being talked to that way. So that's my piece for that. We're going to keep moving. Now, this person progresses the story. I mean, this persona progresses the story to, "I then discovered racism. I then discovered racism when I engaged black people. And again, it's usually I got beat up in high school. They called me a honky, um, and then or I took my first job and the other blacks wouldn't talk to me. And I asked them questions again. I go, what did if they were kids, I go, what did you go home? Did you tell your parents? Like, oh yeah, I told my parents. Like, what did your parents tell you? And they'll say something like, oh, well, my parents told me that some people just have hate in their heart. So we're gonna take that as option A. Option B is I was an adult and I go, did you ever ask them why they treated you that way? And the answer is always no. Every time I've engaged and said, why did those other black adults treat you that way? The answer, and I said, did you ask them why? The answer is always no. Coming back to having that questioning to make it through. I, as a black man, when I went to the Coast Guard Academy, I asked why. When I was in high school, I asked why. Um, when I was in middle school, I asked why. I asked why. And I would get the range of answers from them because I'm dirty, because I'm inferior, because my daddy says. I got their answers. I find something, again, magical about the white person who feels so compelled to tell me these stories because they want me to reflect. They want me to gain something from these stories. And again, 35, 45, 55, 65 years old. They've been carrying these stories for 20, 30, 40 years. And they've never asked any questions about it. They've never examined it themselves. They just took it and just carried it with them like a weight. It's like having a really big rock. And I go, and they're just telling me how heavy this rock is and how long they've been carrying this rock. And I say, oh, wow, that does sound heavy. Um, what kind of rock is it? And they look at me like, I don't know. It's a rock. No, no, I got that. I got that it's a rock. I'm asking you, what kind of rock is it? You've been carrying this rock a long time. What's the utility of this rock? They never thought to get the rock tested. They never thought to break the rock open. Take a look inside. They just carry this thing around. And they want me to know that they carry it around. That's what I hear from such people. You telling me a story about some black kids beating you up in high school back in the 60s. You telling me about your first job and the other blacks on the factory line because you were the only white person on the factory line and they didn't want to associate with you. And you never had the courage to ask, why were they treating you differently? You never had the courage to notice all the other white people were running the place. And maybe that's why they didn't know what you were about because you looked like the bosses. You looked like the cops. You look like the people running things. So while you think that you're an individual and that's got nothing to do with you, you're engaging a community of people that never had that luxury. Minorities and the poor and the disadvantaged, they often don't get that luxury of being an individual. They are part of a thing. So the fact that you never cared enough, you never had the courage to look into the fact that different rights are assigned to different people. I've talked about it before where a white boy can come from the Ozarks or no, that's a nice place. He can come from the Appalachians where his family made meth and moonshine. They're criminals. He can go to college, he can become a doctor, he can go to the big city, and he tells people about where he comes from and how far he's come along. I would put hard cash that no money, I will hard cash money. No one will come up to that him after hearing his story and say, when are you going to give back? When are you going back to those foothills? Or what are you going back to those Appalachian mountains to go give back? Now, talk to a black lawyer, dentist, doctor, data scientist, and instead ask them, how many times has someone asked you when you're going to give back. See the difference? One is assigned individualism. He's allowed to be an individual. The other is not. So when I hear a white person talk about how a group of people that have been treated like a group of people their whole lives treated you like a group of people, I again only hear privilege. I only hear, man, how nice must it be that when people see you, you were raised in a world where people saw you and not a group of people. That's something that I think we all would love to get a piece of. I mean, if you think about the movements today, I argue that's what people are fighting for. They want a taste of that. Um, being an individual sounds awesome. So, just recapping here, we've dug through how being raised where there was no black people around, but you never asked why there was no black people because the answer usually is the black people were ran out by either your parents or your parents' parents or the people around. You had a part in it. And if they didn't have a part in it, they stood by idle while it was done. That's what you did. And when I say you, that's what that community did. That community doesn't have black people because that community worked very hard to ensure there was no black people. That's why. You either have to accept my statement or you have to take the opposite that black people are just so stupid and so dumb and so different than all other humans that they did not do what other people did. They did not want to venture out into this great expanse of America. They did not want to seek other opportunities. Even though they didn't build the hood, you have to say that they chose to just stay there as if they were unaware of anything else going on. I often talk about the parsimony of assumptions, where when you don't know what the truth is, take out your possible options of what it is and examine how many assumptions are necessary for each one. So, in one hand, we have that blacks are just like everybody else, and something prevented them from living everywhere like everyone else. On the other hand, you have no, despite lack of evidence in science and anthropology, blacks are different. We just haven't figured out how they're different, and something about them as a whole prevented them from moving out across these 3,141 counties. The last one has more assumptions. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It has definitely more assumptions. It requires more stuff in order to be the truth. So when you are seeking the truth and there's uncertainty, it's not a bad approach to be parsimonious in which ones you choose. So, number 2 on my list. So, actually, we covered 1 and 2. We covered growing up in a place where there's no black people around and your parents taught you that everybody's the same. We covered that. We covered number 2 actually of your first time experiencing racism was black people being mean. Let's now go down to I am tried to get a job and I was turned down because of affirmative action, or I tried to put my kids in school and they were kicked out or they were not allowed in because of affirmative action quotas. So when I'm entertaining at my home, friends and family, I talk about quotas. I talk about this idea that America has had quotas since the beginning. Quotas was not an issue until recently, but America has always had quotas. So when I hear a white parent tell me, my son did nothing wrong, my daughter did nothing wrong, but because they were white, they weren't let in because of quotas. I ask them, "Have they always been against quotas?" And they say, "Of course, absolutely." I go, "Were your parents against quotas?" We never talked about it, but yes, yeah, no one in my family would be for quotas. I then ask, if this is the case, how come when all these schools were having the quota system of 0% allocated for blacks and 100% allocated for whites, why did we not see you, your husband, your wife, your friends, your parents' friends, your grandparents? Why did we not see you protesting at the school meetings about quotas? Let's get technical here. If a black family walks up to a school and they say our child would like to enroll, and the school says no, we have a quota system, and the black family asks, "Oh, how many black kids do you have here now?" And the school says 0. We've met our quota. Is that a misuse of the word quota? I understand it's not a usual use, but isn't saying only whites a quota system? It is you saying, "This is all we can, accommodate. We can't accommodate all, or we choose not to accommodate all. This is what we can accommodate." That's a quota system. I argue that your most ardent, your loudest, opponents of quota systems, they're not opponents of quota systems. They are opponents of quota systems that give minorities a number higher than 0. These are not the people who, when they see a graduation photo of only white kids, and they just have to look at that and they go, "Huh, that seems a little off." How did that happen? If they see a graduating class per se of, computer science majors, they go, uh, "Hey, I gotta I'm just curious here. What's going on here? I just looked at an entire graduating class computer science majors and awful lot of minority kids there. What's going on?" These are those people. I know this. I know this for a fact. I've seen them do it. I have seen these people see, um, a PhD class of finance PhDs, and it's 85% Chinese or 85%, Asian American, or no, not even Asian American, foreign students from China. I did say it right the first time. Foreign students, Chinese followed by Saudi Arabia, and then maybe one white kid, and they wanna know, that's weird. What's up?" So, I argue their issue is not quotas. Their issue is quotas that assign numbers higher than 0 for others. Now, surely you understand that when you say such things to such people, you get into that, you don't know my heart. You don't know me." We're gonna get into that too, about what I don't know about you. Let's talk about the affirmative action one. Either it happened to them or they know a guy who knows a guy. Basically, the story is guy was turned down for a job he was well qualified for because they had no choice but to hire the black crackhead who was stealing from the company every week. Company didn't want to hire the crackhead who came in. He only showed up for work every 2 or 3 days a week. He was overdosing. um, could barely read. He came into work with a gun in his waist every time. But because of affirmative action, the company had to take this guy and let him go. Business is business. First off, whatever you tell a person like me that someone took your job, you've already lost. You don't own your job. The business owns your job. The business owns that job. It's not yours. If it was your job, you know what you could do? You could rent your job out. You could decide who gets your job. You could sell your job. You can't do any of those things. You own nothing. No one can take anything from you that you don't have, other than maybe your delusions. If you want to own a job, you have two options: become self employed. Self employed people own their job. But I'm going to tell you something from personal experience. That will probably be one of your worst bosses you've ever had. You will do things to you that you would never tolerate from another human being your boss. You will work yourself 90 hours and only pay yourself for 20. You will work yourself for 90 hours and not pay yourself. You would never tolerate this working for someone else. So, absolutely do what you want to, do what you need to do. Um, but I would definitely recommend that you think it through what you're wanting if you truly want to own a job. The other way, it's not even better. You can own the business and by through that own many jobs. Pretty much the same rules, just magnitude. So if you want to own a job, your options are self-employment or own a business. And what's the difference between self-employment and a business? A self-employed person owns a job. There's no system. You can be the best plumber in town, but if you're the only plumber on your crew, you can be the best technician in town. If you're the only technician on your crew, you don't own a business, you own a job. If you don't believe me, go on vacation for 6 months and tell me how business is going. So, to the person who's chosen to do neither of those things, the job's not yours. Whether the business gives it to a Mexican that just crawled across the border and doesn't even have shoes on, whether they give it to the crackhead that you claim it they gave it to, it's theirs to give. And they're a business. I'll tell you this right now. The worse you make it sound what the black person was, the worse you sound. Think about it. If you had any level of value, they would have kept you. That's what they would have done. They would have kept you. But the fact of the matter is, you didn't bring enough value. You did not bring enough value to justify, you know, when with the American Care Act, when that first came out, um, there was a fine if you did not sign up. I was a private business owner. I asked how much was the fine. They told me how much the fine was. The fine was cheaper than getting health care. I was a young guy, I took care of myself, I rolled the dice. I said, "I'll take the fine." That's business. They said, "Well, it steps up." I'm like, "How much is the fine to other times?" They told me the numbers. I'm like, "Yeah, I'll pay that. I'm good to go. I'll pay that." The value of my money in my pocket at that time was worth more than the value of, avoiding the fine. So I paid the fine. If someone tells me, "Fire a good employee," the government says, "Fire a good employee and hire a woman who can barely read. She has no skills at all. None. She's gonna hurt your business. Or pay us a fine of $1,000." I'm gonna give him the grand. If you truly were let go in such fashion, out of all you, then it does affirmative action. It says more about your worth and what you brought to the table than what that black person who did drugs, as far as you claim, didn't bring to the table. Because it basically means as bad as they were a better bet than you. Never mind that affirmative action is just another response to the 100%, 0% quota system. Before affirmative action, these organizations had quotas. The problem is on how you looked. Now, you're going to hear something very often, sometimes circling through libertarians. Um, the libertarian types you'll hear cycling through on this conversation. You'll hear you'll hear conservatives. They'll talk about something called freedom of association. Sounds great, doesn't it? Freedom of association. I it's just this idea of I would like to say whatever I want to say, and that should be okay because my rights. I finally am checking my threads here. So thanks, sir, Mr. Burt. I was wondering how it was coming through. Let's see here. Let's put some people's stuff on here. See if I got any questions or anything here from folks. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So let's see what my guy here is saying. What about the Somalis in North Dakota the Lutherans brought in? Help me out here with that one. Give me more details. What about them? What about the Somalis in North Dakota the Lutherans brought in? I would argue first, when did they bring them in? And after asking when did they bring them in, um, what is the Somali welcome message from there? From the little I know about that situation of Somalis being brought in, you have a couple places like that. So I know in Michigan there's an Arabic, there's a Muslim base of people. We have the Cubans in Miami. Um, these are enclave communities. Okay, these enclave communities A lot of them survived, quote unquote, by staying within their own. Now, there's this fun myth people have that look at them, they're doing so well on their own. Chinatown, the Cubans, but all these groups, if you look at them across the whole on aggregate, no one does better on their own. Even if you come into this country with all the money, if you and your people stick to yourselves, sure, you can get by, but you won't do as well on average as people who are part of the whole. So I would say to your question, I am pretty confident that whether you're talking about the Somalis in North Dakota, the Somalis in Minneapolis, or Minneapolis area, or the Muslim community out in Dearborn, Michigan, I argue it probably doesn't matter to disprove what I was saying. Yeah, I see you meant I figured you meant Minnesota, but um, I'm still crappy at this. So even though I put it as public, Facebook keeps shutting it down because they're haters. So I have to keep remembering to put it on open for everybody. So yeah, I would say that for me that would be a case of um, I call it the tariff trick. It's not so much about what's there, but what's not there. So I argue what's not there is a true environment where the Somalis can thrive. Coming back to that right to be an individual. I mean, let's talk about it really quickly. Does anybody remember um, the shooting in the backyard of the Australian woman, and the officer was a Somali? Does anyone remember how quickly he was arrested and how quickly he was sentenced? Does anyone remember how quickly it became about his community, how his community started fearing, how there was actually attacks on the Somali community? These are not proof of the argument I'm making. These are supporting supporting evidence. How about that? It supports it. I believe Mr. Anderson was responding in response to my statement of you won't find a single county that has proven history within the United States of blacks being welcomed with open arms. And I'll say this too, Thomas, there is a view that African Americans are different than Africans within those two communities and even outside how they're viewed. Um, I have had many conversations. In fact, our last conversation touched on it. We did an entire segment on African American versus expat, the diaspora. So you do see those changes across those different views to where, and it doesn't always work against me. I tell the story about how I was in Finland and I was walking down the street and this guy comes out, he's just yelling, and I don't know him. I'm in Finland, no one knows me, and he's just yelling and he's just going. And finally, I realized he's getting pretty close to me, and I turn around and I go, "Who do you think I am?" That was my comment to him. I said, "Who do you think you're talking to?" And he responded in Finnish still, and he went from yelling at me in the street to going, be our guest, put our service to the test." I mean, smiles and everything. Turned out he owned the restaurant he ran out of. So I asked my friend, like, "What was that?" And he said he thought you were an African refugee. Once he heard that American accent, he went from hatred to, "Oh, we love you and your money." There is a flip side treatment of that for African Americans against Africans here in the US. You're a Nigerian in America? What are you here? Are you a doctor? When I don't dress this way, let's just say people don't assume that I'm a doctor. In fact, let's just back up. Um, when I walk down the street dressed like this, people assume, and that happens a lot. Which school do you teach at? I must be a teacher. Um, so it it can be used both ways. I remember, doing my own real estate property management. First time I went in the court for an eviction, and they had this setup to where you lawyers basically get to go first because their time is precious. So I walked in, I didn't say anything, and the judge motioned me up. He goes, "Let's get you out of here, sir." And I go, "Okay, great, 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 great." So we start going through everything, and I start talking, and quickly becomes clear that I am not a lawyer. And he goes, "Wh- "Where? Which firm are you with?" I said, "I'm not with any firm. I'm here representing myself." So that's a demonstration that, first of all, racism doesn't work only one way. Um, he just assumed for a black man to be dressed up and walking into his court, you had to be a lawyer. You couldn't be a normal man. So, hmm, so someone just asked me a question. Um, so I told that story to say that that luxury of being an individual. That with that story about the Finnish man, he did not see a human. He did not see a person. He saw a community. He was yelling about you Somalis coming into my country, you African refugees. Once he heard that American accent, I became an individual, which is why I often tell people, um, I only know what it's like to be an American, a full American, when I leave America. So, um, well, that's would be my main response regarding the Somalis. Um, and I don't know much about every church, but even you know what? Nah, let's just do it. You brought it up. Let's just do it. So you will see various churches. I'm not going to name them. You will see various churches showing efforts of from adopting minority children to bringing minority children into the church to bringing families over. You will see this. Here's what you're not seeing: them moving up into places of leadership. So I actually have a gent here. He's going to come in. So just to recap, we're talking today about the topic being the hard right for the American white. And basically, the idea is let's attack conversation from the point of view of someone saying, "Hey, you know what? I have never done anything to anybody. What's this got to do with me?" And we're just going down the list of things that have been brought up, from quotas hurt me as a white person, affirmative action hurt me as a white person, just going down this line and just going through it logically. So, got a guest on here, Joe Cardinale. Why don't you introduce yourself? And then,
Well, first,
I don't know how much for, but you caught up and we'll get into it.
first off, right? Can you hear me? Okay.
You're good, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting me come on. Such late notice. Otherwise, I would have shaved. But anyway, I really wanted to engage with you in conversation. And one thing you said that really hit home exactly what I want to say is, well, paraphrasing what you said is, that doesn't affect me. I'm not a part of the problem, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been thinking a lot lately as I try to recover from some of the mistakes I've made in my life and some demons in my life. And I couldn't help but put a long, long list together of where specifically white privilege and male privilege benefited me. I'll give you an example. I was leaving a Kenosha Kingfish game last summer, and unfortunately, I chose to drive drunk as well as doing a few bumps of coke. Very selfish in the first part, but I forgot to even put my headlights on. I get pulled over, not too far from my house actually. No, and at the time you think, oh, I'm acting cool. You know what I mean? You think I got this, just act cool, nothing's gonna happen. But in hindsight, there's no way in how heck I could have acted normal, being with that many stuff in my body and whatnot. And it was probably, and I had an ego too, and not once was the conversation ever hostile with the officer. It didn't ask me about how much I had to drink, didn't ask me where I was that night, didn't ask me why I didn't have my headlights on. I had volunteered that it was a rental, which is true that I forgot that it wasn't automatic, but still suspicious enough where I should have been checked. And I know at the time I'm thinking, oh, okay, I got lucky, I skated. But in hindsight, you can't tell me that if my skin was any other color, my name was any other name, that I wouldn't have been pulled out and had serious consequences. And there's a million times like that. Examples.
So you cut out there for a second. So
sorry.
Did you get home?
I did get home. Like I said, I was totally selfish, dumb, terrible. That's an apology in itself. But yeah, I did get home. Thankfully that my consequences didn't affect anybody else. My decision didn't affect anybody else. But yeah, there's no.
But I think if I'm hearing you, what you're saying, you're asking the question. If you looked like me and you were in that state and you got pulled over, would you have been sent home?
No, you would have been in cuffs. You would have been in cuffs for the whole weekend because it was a Friday night, Ray. And I'm serious.
Oh, and we don't know. I'm just saying. Hold on. We don't know. I think what me and you are agreeing on is that is the question.
Yeah. Yes.
That is the question, because what I want to make it clear to people is we gain nothing by treating the negative absolute in kind with what we perceive as the positive absolute. So us saying for a fact we know what would have happened to me, we don't know that.
It's true.
What we're saying here is, because of how the world is, the question is there.
Yeah. And there's I'm sorry, but what I would say is I had a lot less fear than I think others may have had, because I knew that I just knew of my, I call it privilege, call it whatever you want. I fully accept that, but I knew that I was, in hindsight, and even then, that I was very lucky and I had less fear than I should have, just because of certain things. And I mean, I can quite.
The first one I talked about here. So let's just go down the list then for you, so you get you caught up. So the first one was the person who comes up to me and they say, you know what? I grew up in a place where I was told to treat everybody the same, and everybody was happy. There was no black people around, but everybody was nice. Nobody was racist. And I did not discover racism until I met black people and they treated me bad. Thoughts on that?
I guess I've never thought about it in terms of, I'll put my personal example together. I lived a very sheltered life in the beginning, when I was younger, and, I didn't realize some of the real world things like that. So when based off your question,
did you grow up in a mixed community?
No, Italian, private school, Catholic, all that crap. But
Did you know the races existed when you were a kid?
I did, but that was my point. The point is, my only experience was based off of stereotypes and based off of what you might hear and show. Fine, there's a lot of comedy and whatnot, and maybe you might argue they're harmless. And it's all good in the art of comedy, or whatever. But still, little things like
I
that,
think your
especially.
Wi-Fi is kicking in and out there. I don't know if you're in your
Oh shoot,
basement or what. No worries.
shoot.
But I really want to get into this though with you. So sounds like your parents or someone in your family worked their butts off. Private school's not free. So they
No,
got you there because they care.
they did. But my only
So
experience was based, like I said, off the stereotypes, and that affect. That is in some way, a lot of that is a
did you
compliance
ever
with.
ask though? Did you ever ask as a kid, like, why are there no black people around here?
No, I can't say I didn't. I did. I have. Did we have couple? Did we have? I should say I actually had friends that were black in in like elementary school, high school, etc. But it wasn't like it. Put it this way, I noticed. I'll fully admit I noticed the difference in their skin and different things like that, and I based my, even though I love them, we're still great friends today, but I based my initial thoughts on them, and at times even past, based off stereotypes and different things. Did I lose you, Ray? Or
Um, I don't let. I'm just seeing bringing folks in here.
oh, okay,
So, all right. So yeah, I was just curious on that one. Okay. I was just digging into different types of quotas from the I know a guy who knows a guy who didn't get the job because they gave it to a black crackhead, or my kid didn't get into school because they had to let black kids in.
yeah,
Have you heard this conversation
yeah, yeah. I'm a
before? I mean, yeah, what are you thinking?
absolutely. I'm a recovered Republican, so the disdain for affirmative action. I mean, that was preached to me. Everybody, it wasn't about what was right or wrong. It was, there's a government mandated quota, and because of that, your kids, your family are going to be affected because of the government's trying to be PC, whatever, and get win votes, and the Democrats are trying to win votes by appeasing to the minorities and different things like that. That's preached heavily, and not just by Republicans or different things like that. I mean, people that it's sincerely good people, in my opinion. They don't know any better, but that's just it. Generational. It gets so ingrained. At some point, you become numb, and I definitely became numb and sensitized, and I'm ashamed. It shouldn't have taken this long. So I'm no way looking for kudos and whatnot. And in my opinion, I'm just as guilty as George Floyd's murderer because of I guess my ignorance and burying my head in sand for too long and saying it doesn't affect anyone I care about, and maybe it's a little overblown. There's two.
So we're gonna try to keep rolling with this here because you're saying good stuff, but you're cutting in and out on me here. But
Yeah, I'll try to
I'm
move
hearing
around
you
a little
though.
bit.
It's probably just the video, but I would say uh, so. Let's take a sidestep here. So when we talk, part of today is talking about how cops need to be holding other cops accountable. You hear this?
Yeah,
So while I'm one of the people saying this, I equally say that that's easy to say when it's not you.
hmm
Let's say I never watched a guy get choked out to death or anything like that, but you can have these moments where you make a personal selfish choice to kind of just go with the flow.
yeah. Which is the same thing as burying your head in sand, essentially, and kicking the can down the road for somebody else to deal with it.
Right. So
Yeah,
I say that to say it is easy to talk about integrity and honor and the hard right
yeah.
when it's not you.
Right, exactly. I mean, exactly. I mean, you're 100% right, Ray. It's, I guess it's some way natural. I mean, I think innately human beings are selfish to their core, and they learn how to be selfless, if you will. But it's selfish in a way up to, you're 100% right. Selfishly, as long as it's not affecting myself or the people I care about, it's a lot easier to sleep at night, turn a blind eye, and say it'll be fixed, but it's not my fight. And that is just, and when you have that attitude, you're just as guilty as anything.
And I'll say this too. I don't think what people realize is when you do that, it doesn't just affect the people that you didn't help that maybe you should have. It changes you.
Mm-hmm.
It changes you. Your decisions shape who you are. So I find a lot of people, and I'll tell you, I get this one a lot too. Ray, never been a part of anything racist, but if someone did something in front of me, I would act. And I always say, no, you wouldn't.
Exactly. Right.
No, you
There's.
wouldn't. I got one on my list here. We're gonna talk. We're gonna skip down my list to stay on this topic here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one I get very often is I raised all my children to either not see color or think all colors are beautiful. I raised my children to be part of the good fight. I get this. A person will just come to me and they just need me to know, Ray, I raised my children to be good people.
Right. Well, and that, you when you start off with a phrase like that, that's the problem right there. You don't have to go any or farther. When everybody, you don't see color, whatever, and they probably mean well by it, but the problem is you're already differentiating, you know, the different colors and different races, you know, um, that and I that's just it. When you see color, what's the difference between me and you? I mean, do we have different stereotypes? You know what I mean? When I feel when somebody says that, and I've thought that too, but in hindsight, what is the difference between me and you? Honestly, I mean, it's in terms of color and not color. What I'm trying to say here is I should have put more thought into it, but it's a flawed way.
Okay, I
It's a
got you
flawed
back
sentence.
there.
Did you get
I
my
lost
back?
you there for a sec. I got
Oh,
you
okay.
back there, but okay. I was just gonna add in this. So the idea of when someone says that to me, this is what
Yeah.
I like taking things apart logically.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people that whatever you have done, that's what you taught your children to do.
Yeah.
So if you have never stood up your whole life, I don't care what you said to your kids. That's what.
Did I lose you, Ray?
So I kicked myself out of my own live streaming right there just now.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
You
I
know,
was gonna. I was just
I was like,
messaging you.
I was like, what did I do? I got this new mouse and it's got all these buttons on it. I
Oh, that's
forgot that I'm not a gamer and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I probably
well.
need to go back to the they make jitterbugs for people, for older people for the phones. I
Ray,
need to
you're
get a
not,
jitterbug mouse. That's what I need to do. Just have two buttons on it. I just need to own up to what I am and just go ahead and get one of those bad boys.
it's whatever you need to do. I can't say I've ever heard what the heck a jitterbug is, but um,
So, oh, you never seen those commercials? It's the jitterbug phone. It's a phone for older people. The buttons are really big and they light
oh,
up and
that's
everything.
hilarious. That's actually
Yeah. So
hilarious.
I
Yeah,
need a jitterbug mouse. That's what I need.
nice. That's funny. Well,
So
there
no,
you
I
go.
was just gonna say when someone brings that up, I tell them that whatever life you lived,
Mm-hmm.
that's the life your children are likely going to live when it comes to these topics. In finance, when you're doing what's the expectation of what the price is going to be tomorrow? What
Mm-hmm.
is the price today? That is
Right.
your best forecast.
Yeah.
So you handle it. If you never stood up, if you never engaged, um, it's unlikely that your children are going to do that. It's just unlikely. It's not impossible, but highly unlikely. They're gonna do what you taught them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's
Uh,
an innate generation to generation thing. Um, I don't know. I'm going to ask you because I really want to hear your thoughts on this. But do you think? I believe maybe I'm too optimistic that there might finally be a shift in the generations we are in now, where going forward we might actually see some significant tangible change. I want to hear from you, but I have some hope in that, and I think that the hits onto your point as well.
Oh, I absolutely think something's happening here. I I think the fact you have so many people saying they don't think it's anything, I think that's proof that it's something.
Hmm.
Like, when you're on Facebook and you're having a conversation with somebody, or you probably don't debate as much as I do, and a guy goes, "I don't have time for you." Of course you do. You've been talking to me for the last hour.
Right. They just don't have any rebuttal. They know you got them. I mean, I've used that. I think I've used that with you, Ray. I mean, we have.
How did it work
You know,
out? How did
yeah,
it work out?
yeah. Well, that's the reason I don't post. You scared me away from Facebook debates, um, but yeah, no,
Well,
you're
I'm
100% right.
hoping that okay, I scared you away from Facebook debates.
I
I'm
was
hoping
sarcastic, but yeah,
what
yeah.
I'm hoping what comes of it long term is I caution you and others about the proper way to fight. Conversations, it's a dance, it's a fight, okay? There's a proper way to do it.
Hmm.
You don't have to agree with me. In fact, I get a little scared when everyone agrees. That's a dangerous situation when everybody in the room's thinking the same way. You don't need that. I think Dave Ramsey said it about couples on money. He said, if you and your spouse think exactly the same about money, one of you's unnecessary.
Ray, I'm so sorry. Can I bounce out just for a few minutes? I got to go take care of something, or can I just join back on the live stream, or how does this go?
Oh, I just
Uh,
kick you out.
oh, okay. Well, I'll message you, and if you're still going, I'd love to come back on. Just
Absolutely, sir.
my father's
Absolutely.
calling, so thank you. I'll be right
No
back.
worries. So Joe is kind of just giving a little feedback. Me and him, we've had an interesting relationship over time, and we've had some conversations kind of on these topics. And he was saying I kind of scared him away from, public discourse. But what I'm really hoping that he is meaning is that you know, that I kind of helped him see that if you're going to go out there, if you're going to engage, bring something more than some feelings, bring something more than some words. How about that? Well, not feelings, bring something more than the words, have something behind it. Or maybe one of my better sayings, if you're going to present your stance, have some standing behind it. Stance and standing are not synonyms in this context that I'm using. If you're going to present a stance, have some standing. Social media is full of people presenting stances. What's lacking, or what is in low supply? How about that? What is in low supply is people bringing a standing to go along with that stance. I was just bringing up the one where the person says, you know, I couldn't, because of affirmative action, I couldn't get in because of this, we couldn't do it. We talked about the fact that we've always had quota systems. The issues with quota systems from conservative and libertarians did not pop up until they quota systems changed from 100% zero. That's when the issues came up. So we tore through that. We tore through the luxury of being able to grow up in a place where race is not talked about. We even talked about what is the meaning behind one set of parents telling their kids they're not better than others, and other parents telling their kids you're not less than others. Um, those two different messages in the same country to two different children, and the only difference you can see between the two parents, even when you control for income and education, is race. Another one that comes up a lot. There's actually a local radio host guy. um, he used to talk. I'm sure he still talks now, but he blocked me because I kept going at him. But he talks a lot about how the race thing's not a big deal. He grew up in the poor side of town and he worked his whole life and he scraped by and he earned what he has. And this is another thing you get from a guy. You'll get a certain white person that says because they're poor, or because they were poor, or they've been poor, or they worked with their hands, because they're white and are poor and don't live high on the hog, that is proof that racism is not real. And that the fact that I even mention racism is racism because I am saying they don't exist. So let me put that more succinctly. There is a person who believes that because they are white and they weren't born with a silver spoon in their mouth, that is proof that the narrative that blacks don't have it, that whites have it better. That's a good way to say it. That is proof that the narrative that white people have it better is crap because that person was given nothing. They were born in a foster home. They had to work up from the ground. Nothing was handed to them. No one was there for them. Nothing was given. So how dare you claim they have it better because they're white? We're going to use little statistics for this one. Off the top of my head, I believe the average height for a woman in America is like 5'4". And even if these numbers are wrong, just go with me here. Actually, you know what? I'm sitting here in front of 18 monitors. Let's just get her done right. Oh, 5'4". So, average height of a woman is 5'4". Average height of a man is 5'6". If I say that men are taller than women, does that mean that I'm saying every man is taller than every woman? I think if someone said, Ray, your statistics is trash because I know a woman who's 6'3" and I'm 5'6", that's proof your statement is trash. What has the person done? I've given information about the aggregate, the on average, and they've responded in kind with an anecdote, an individual observation. Now, here's where the passion usually comes in. Just because I'm only one person doesn't mean my story doesn't matter. Absolutely correct. But your story matters in context with all the other stories. You're not more important than the other millions of observations that we utilize to get the average height of a woman and the average height of a man. Your story about the 6'3" girl that you dated, yes, it happened. But we counted her with the women and we counted you with the men. And that's how we get those averages. Now, what is being brought up is that while the medians of the medians of those two populations, the population of women, population of men, while they have a separate average, a separate mean, the distributions overlap. When we talk about wealth and income in America for blacks versus the other ethnicities, we are talking about the means and how the means are statistically, overwhelmingly statistically different. The rebuttal that such a person gives me about being poor themselves, the only story they told is what we already knew. The two distributions overlap. Yes, some black people have more money than a lot of white people. Some white people have less money than some black people. Given that we're in a capitalist society, there's a lot of overlap on the lower end of the spectrum, meaning for every income level at the lower end, you'll find whites and blacks. It, it's a if you look at the graph, it's skewed to the left. It starts on the left hand side really fat, and then as income goes up, it gets thinner and thinner. So you're not really saying anything when you tell these stories about the original thing brought up. Now, if I say, tell me about your life, sure, tell me about your life. But the statement that there is a difference, that is not changed by your personal story. Now, a person can argue that you have no proof, Ray, that being white for me helped me. They could challenge me at the personal level, given how little I know about their life and given how little of the time I spent watching their life, and given how complex interpersonal communication and interaction is. But honestly, again, it's nothing more than a taunt because you can't prove it didn't. I can prove that my familial past has some level of impact on my familial present. You can't prove that what happened to my family 2 or 3 or 4 generations ago has 0 impact on where my family goes today. So, if my parents get into Harvard versus go to the military, you can't say that had no impact on me going to the military. If my grandparents were given access to certain things in life, you can't say that didn't shape my course when I was born. And you can't do it because we all know it's wrong. We all know it's wrong. We just heard our friend say he grew up in a world where someone other than him provided for his private school. So you can't say familial past doesn't affect familial present. So whether we go back all that time ago, which we're talking what, 3, maybe 4 generations to slavery, we can go back that far for someone my age. Or we could just go back 1 generation for civil rights movement. Up till then, how things were. Play it safe. Let's say 2 generations, going through the 40s through the 60s, 70s. Even then, how are you going to say that what my parents went through has 0 impact on my coming up into this world? Where they decided to take me, what they were able to do for me. Can you ever try to sell that? The private school your parents were allowed into that my parents weren't allowed to. So even if you were a foster child, um, I was reading a story the other day in Arkansas about how there was a foster home, basically a home for black boys. Had about 75 kids in it. And in the middle of the night, someone padlocked the doors and they set the place on fire. 20 of the boys died. Big metal mesh windows to get out. Of course, no one was ever arrested. No, nothing was ever done. No one was ever found. You ever heard a story about a white orphanage set on fire? I never looked. I'm just asking. I'm actually afraid to search for how many other black orphanages were set on fire. A lot of us know about the 5 schoolgirls that were in the church that were killed. A lot of people don't know how often rooms were bombed, set afire, simply because the people inside were black. The first black banker, Jesse Bingham, based out of Chicago, Let's talk about stratification real fast. The blacks are not the only ethnicity to ever have a ghetto. The Irish had ghettos. The Italians had ghettos. Everyone had ghettos when they come here. The difference Irish, you worked up your way, you became a doctor or a lawyer, you got money. Guess what you got to do? You got to leave the ghetto. You got to move to the nice side of town. Everyone got to do this except the black man. Black doctors, lawyers, and bankers like Jesse Bingham, very wealthy man, when they tried to move out of the west side or south side and tried to go out to the nicer side in Chicago, Lakeshore Drive, 3 of his houses were firebombed so much. Finally, in the 3rd house, they killed one of his children, and that's when he finally moved back to the ghetto. What was denied African Americans that was not denied to any other group was stratification. Educated and better off minorities, middle class and upper class, they got to move somewhere else. They got to become their own group. It didn't matter if you were a doctor or a hood. If you were black, you stayed on the black side of town, on top of each other. So even if you worked your way up to get something better for your kids still had to go to the same schools as the kids whose parents didn't care. This is the privilege to stratify, the privilege to not worry about the orphanage being set aflame because of who's inside it. The privilege that if you went to an orphanage and you go to school and you work your way up, people will ask you about your parents, assuming you had them. While on me, on the other hand, I had both my parents growing up. People assumed I didn't have them. So even the privilege of people assuming that you have a family, that people care about you, that's a privilege. That's humanizing. They assume you're a human that has humans that care about you. I just want to cycle back through that list there. We started with the beginning of a life of a white person who grew up in a place where there was no racism. Racism washed away all the races, specifically blacks. The person then goes out into the world, school or whatever, and they're treated differently by the blacks, but they never asked why, and no one ever told them in their community, even though they knew. You got places like Wilmington, North Carolina, you got places like Milwaukee up here. They know why there's no blacks around. You never asked as a kid, which you're a kid, so it's fine, but your people never told you. They never told you. And you didn't ask. Kind of like the deal. But then you are confronted with these blacks who are saying these things, and you don't know why, but you don't ask why. You just chalk it up to malice. Hanlon's razor. Don't assign to malice what can be explained by ignorance. If you are a white person and goes to your first job or goes to school and the black kids start talking to you about you being white people, and this is the first time someone has not talked to you as an individual, you are now being treated like you're a group and you've never been treated this way. Hanlon's razor. Assume ignorance, even though there might be malicious to you. So you can use a mixture. You can assume ignorance or ignorance and malice mixed up, especially if they're beating on you. But still, let's talk about ignorance. With the ignorance, it comes from the fact that these are people who have never been treated like an individual. And because they've never been treated as an individual and they've never seen anyone else in their world treated like an individual, they are ignorant to the fact that you can be treated like an individual. That's really what's happening in that moment. They are unaware that it's even possible to be treated like an individual. The white person, the one white person working the factory line alongside them, they're going to treat you the way everyone gets treated, part of the group. So, yeah, what are you, the boss's son? What are you the boss's kid? What are you doing down here? Your summer job? What are you slumming? What happened to you? Where's your rich car? Where's your rich family? Is this punishment for something? After work, where are you going? Back to the nice side of town? You're right. They are laying something on you as if you're part of a group. Have the courage to ask why. I remember I had some cousins come up from the South, and it's in a, it's called suburban area. I'm on a street here, like think like an old town area of a city. And I'm driving in the car and I don't want to go all the way around the car. I don't want to go all the way around the car. So what I do is I do a U-turn. It's a wide enough street. I do a U-turn. So I do the U-turn and come back around and I do the U-turn right in front of a police car. And it's so close that when I do the U-turn, he just yells out of his car. He's like, "Hey," he's basically saying, "Really? You're going to do it right in front of me?" And without hesitation, I go right back at him and say, "There's no one here but me and you. There's no one here." And I go, "What?" And then he goes like that, and then he goes, "Get out of here." So I'm driving off, and my cousins from the South are looking at me like, "Who are you? And where did you get these powers?" Slash, "You are crazy." They come from a place where whether and here's the telling part. They're like, "You talk to white people like that?" They didn't say you talk to cops like that. He said, "You talk to white people like that." We had a long conversation that day that led with asking the question why. These are grown men who, whether this society admits it or not, the net result was to be in awe of a black man daring to speak back to a white man. This ain't 1865. This isn't 1955. This was 2013, 2014. That's when this was. I see Joe's back here. Hey, how we doing, sir?
Hey, Ray. Good. Thanks for letting me back on. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. We were just talking about when things happen to you, do you ask why or do you assign malice? Do you assume ignorance and ask why, or do you assign malice? Um, so that's what I was just picking up on here, where it is a luxury to have something happen to you as a white person. I argue it's a luxury to have something happen to you because you're white. Black people call you names or whatever, or treat you bad. And you don't have to figure it out because it doesn't impact your life as a whole. You can go somewhere else. You can go to another town. You can go to another club. You could go away from black people. Like if black people did something weird, your parents can move. They could go to another school. You could actually move up. If you are a white guy experiencing racism, you could actually just work hard until you stop seeing black people. you know, you can move to a neighborhood with no black people. Um, and I guess we're kind of digging into the idea of reverse racism. So why don't we jump in there? What are your thoughts on reverse racism? Is it real? Is it possible? What?
Well, I think it would be ignorant to say it's not real. I think it would be along the lines of the white guilt, the I have a black friend, whatever, along the lines of saying it's not real, because I don't think you're being honest with yourself if you don't say it's real. Now, myself, I've never experienced it, but you're 100% right. It is so much easier for me as a white person to avoid it, ignore it, chalk up to some crazy dude, because you're right. I'm not seeing it consistently. If I had seen it, even ever, and you're not living in fear. You don't have essentially an entire ancestry history of living in fear with racism and whatnot. So innately, no, I can't say I've experienced it. Do I think it's real? Sure. I think of all races, of all creeds, there's some prejudice, but um, like you've said, it's different between me and you. If I was racist to you, or you were racist to me, whatever. I think we both have different internal, at least, reactions and feelings and emotions about it. I would consider you a jerk, nothing, think, whatever, write you off. But I could imagine, I guess, like, no, I'm sorry for saying that. I can't imagine the internal, that you may feel, or maybe somebody else, maybe not you specifically, but, you know what I'm saying?
So I think maybe that's touching in some I've never articulated before. So if a black person is racist to you, you would chalk it up as that person being racist.
No, I would chalk. Here's the thing. I would chalk up to being a jerk, and the reason I say that is because I can't even point to one example of ever having racism against
No, no,
me.
no. Fair enough. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Let's say I just start calling you all kinds of names, and you're just like, that guy's a
Yep.
jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
If
I would
I'm
have.
hearing you properly, you're not saying if a black guy starts going off on you, your thought is not black people do this to white people.
Put it this way. Somebody called me Guido. I have not a one iota of fear for my life, safety, prejudice for anything. We're obviously on the other end of the spectrum. You can't say the same, because there's a generational history of actions following those words. Show words are signs of racism, actions are racism. They're all intertwined. And in my opinion, if somebody's racist enough to come say the N-word or whatever to your face, they're racist enough to go further. If they had the courage, at least. So, or the hatred in their heart, whatever you want to say. But I hope if I'm not answering, or if I'm going off, I
No, we're
apologize.
just talking here.
Okay.
So I haven't looked at it. I just pulled it up now. I've been hearing a lot of talk about this. This talk about Merriam-Webster changing the definition of racism. I've seen articles on it. I just now took the time to look it up. So I don't know if this is the updated version, but here's what I see. A belief that a race is a primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a race. That's one. Two, a doctrine or political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles. And B, which is maybe what everyone's talking about, a political or social system founded on racism. So I'm thinking what is the new part here is mentioning of a political system or a social system,
Yeah.
or a doctrine or political program. I'm thinking this is why everyone's so finally it works. Because if you look at that there, if there's a program that prevents me from getting into school, it doesn't matter that you didn't write the program and you're just another kid. It doesn't matter. It's a doctrine. The whole thing is racist. And I I've used this analogy before. People that have pains. Sharp pain is you get shot or stabbed. You get cut. It's high in intensity, but short in duration. Then you have dull pains. Dull pains are lower in intensity, but much longer in duration. Chronic arthritis, there's constant pain. It's not better when you go to sleep. It's not better when you wake up. I've got a buddy with Crohn's disease. It's constant. It's continuous. When we can use the same analogy for racism. The white guy with the hood on his head with the rifle and the flaming cross on horseback, that is a sharp pain. The guy calling me a name in the bar, that's a sharp pain. The majority of the racism that you endure in this nation is dull pain. It's the unceasing, it's the continuous, lower in intensity, but just continual, you know?
Mm-hmm. Did you by chance see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's statement after George Floyd's murder?
Not after George Floyd's. No, what did he have? I've seen
Uh,
statements from him before. I haven't
it,
been a fan of his statements.
yeah, I mean, right. And I didn't mean to bring it up, but I thought it was the most excellent articulated, and the way he said it gave me pause, and it made me think the most out of any other public sentiment for any celebrity
Let's
or
see what our
whatever.
boy has to say.
There was one line in there about basically he comparing it to asbestos and dust, or hidden dust with the sunlight shining on it, but it's always there. The way he said it, he's 10 times more articulate than I am. Was really made me stop and think. I thought it was the best one out of any celeb or whatever.
Okay, so I see he did write up an article. Yeah, okay. So I'm reading it here. It doesn't seem that bad. Yeah, okay. He's talking about
There's
Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, there's a specific paragraph where they showed. I mean, I read
Talking
the whole
here.
thing, but
What was the part that caught you?
the part that caught me was when he gets into comparing racism to the hidden dust in your home that you sometimes don't see until the sunlight shines through. We must be vigilant, blah blah blah. But the dust will always be there. And there's another line he used about, or maybe it was someone else, but I swear it was him about essentially burning buildings. I don't condone looters or riots, but you know, black people have been inhaling,
I found
smoke.
it.
Okay.
Racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it until you let the sun in. Then you see a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. But we have to stay vigilant because it's always still in the air. All right. All right. I'm good with Kareem today.
That's good.
I'm good with Kareem today.
Good.
So some of the guys who look like me, when they get a little bit of money, and by a little bit I mean a lot, they forget that money changes their skin color, and they start saying crazy things like my boy Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman said we're gonna just cure racism if I just stop talking about it. So I start getting hit over the head with a stick. I just pretend the stick's not there, and magically No, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, it caught
So
me at least. I mean, made me think longer than anything else I heard. It hit home harder than anything else, I should say,
no,
for
that was
whatever
good.
reason.
Yeah, in fact, I should have started in the beginning here where he says, yes, protests are often used as an excuse for some to take advantage, just as when fans celebrating a hometown sports team championship burn cars and destroy storefronts. I don't want to see stores looted or even buildings burn, but African Americans have been living in a burning building for many years, choking on the smoke as the flames burn closer and closer.
Similar
Okay.
to MJ, Michael Jordan a lot of times avoided this stuff too for probably the sake of business, sake of avoiding controversy,
And
taking
that's
part
always
from.
the thing. I mean, whether you're completely famous or you're even me, it's that question, what do you owe?
Mm-hmm.
Again, because it's this conflict of you want to be your own person. You want to be an individual. You're being lumped in the whole time. Your whole life, you're being told, well, we're treating you this way because you guys usually do this. We're treating you this way because most of you do that. So you start working so hard to show that you're an individual, and then you finally get it. Okay, Ray, we're not going to treat you like the others. And I argue that what some of us see, and sadly some of us don't, that's a test. If at that moment I accept you after you say to me, okay, Ray, you're good, we won't treat you like the others, That is an integrity that test. That is a courage test. A lot of people ask me, Ray, you're talking about this stuff all the time, but bro, you live pretty well. You have built your own little cave world. Your family does very well. You're not on the streets. Cops are not hassling you. Why are you talking about this stuff? And I talk about it because I see a nation that wants it both ways. Before I accomplished anything, before I did anything that this nation would respect, before I went into the military, I wanted to be an individual, but I wasn't given that. Blacks are blacks. I remember older adults telling me that if you want to be treated like an equal, you need to serve your country. That was a requirement as a black person to serve my country. It wasn't an option. It wasn't a choice. If you do these things, then you will be treated like an equal man. If you do well, if you go to school, if you get extra degrees, then you will then get treated like a man. I chose to do it. What I learned very quickly is anybody who disrespects you, that doesn't know you, and tells you that you have to do things to be respected, it doesn't matter what you do, they will never respect you. Now, luckily for me, the things they told me to do worked out to my favor. I didn't die in combat, and school helped out. But I say that what I see in America, if you are one of the African Americans who makes it through the gauntlet, and that's what I'm going to call it, if you make it through the gauntlet, they don't want to give credit to that black group. So remember, before you were treated like a lump. Anything you do, that's what black people do. Anything any other black person does, that's what they do. That's why how I live, how I dress, and ask me about black on black crime, as if I'm on the corner, as if that's my boys putting up those rounds. They still see nothing wrong with asking me those questions. But the moment they hear about a black female astronaut or a black kid that got into 5 Ivy League schools, why does it matter what their race is? Why does it matter? It's an individual. Why can't we be individuals? This is the trick that I see in America, where no credit can be, for this group, no credit can be given to the black community. If one of us makes it, it's almost like saying that's a fluke. That's an individual. They're different because they're an individual. So that doesn't count for black people. It can't be that black people can be smart. It can't be that black people could be astronauts. That person is an anomaly, and we identify that anomaly as an individualism. So we can still maintain that most blacks, and I've seen black friends fall prey to this, where the white community will tell them, oh, you're nothing like the others. You're cool. Come on in, join the party. And they go. Now, it's a weird thing. When I was in Ranger school, the whole time you're thinking about quitting. But when you see somebody quit, you're like, don't do it. I can't believe you did it. So you're telling a guy, I can't believe you quit. You might even say, you're going to regret this the rest of your life. You are an idiot. You are a loser if you quit. But after a while, you don't agree with their decision to quit, but you understand. Coming back to how we converse here in America, we need more people realizing that it is completely possible to not condone what you do, to not condemn what you do, but to understand. It is completely possible to say, I understand why you did it, but you still got to go to jail. Possible. There's this false narrative that if I even for a split second say I understand you, then that means I condone you. And you're seeing that right now. When you see a black person say, I understand why they're so mad in the streets. Oh, so you support rioting and shooting and killing and murdering? No, I don't. I said I understand why there's people out in the streets. I understand why they set the building on fire. If we're all honest, there's things we want to do, but we don't do. Maybe for legality reasons or even consequential reasons. I heard a pastor once. Yeah. Yeah. A pastor, he once said to me, let me get this right. He said, if I did whatever I wanted to do, I wouldn't be married. we have this idea. We have this idea that not letting someone do what they want to do is some kind of disapproval of them. So maybe we got it both ways. If I say I understand you, then I'm approving of you. And if I don't approve of what you do, so if I don't condone you, then I'm saying I have an issue with you. Across many topics, we have this issue. So that's what you're seeing happening, where if I say I understand why people are angry, that means I equally support their actions. Coming back to what I was saying earlier on, the separation of having feelings and being led to act based on those feelings. I'm totally okay. I'll tell you right now, me, I feel like every building in the world is worth being leveled if one of my children's life is in the balance. If the question is every standing building in the world or my child's life, there's nothing to talk about. We are leveling every building. That's how I feel. I have leveled no buildings. And let's be honest, if something happened to my child, would I have the feasibility to level every building? Even if I committed to it as a man, what would actually happen? I would eventually get taken down by an FBI TAC unit team after the second or third building. I would just be another one of those stories of a man who broke and went too far. But we all know I wouldn't come close to leveling every building.
Right.
So, and I will give America this. We've been talking about dehumanizing other people. I will give America this. We'll dehumanize anybody if it suits our agenda, even each other, across race even.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Democrat, Republican. I mean, even this COVID thing. I am amazed how I don't get shocked very often. I was amazed. I remember when I would say about war that, those million Iraqi civilians that died during the Iraq war, but most Americans don't even know the number. If they do, whatever, who cares? Their lives don't equate. It's not the same. I used to always say that if a whole bunch of Americans died, America would react differently. I was proven wrong. We have had 120,000 Americans die. But because of political agendas, who cares?
People forget there were riots and protests over that too. I'm not sure how peaceful they were even. I don't
I'm just saying.
There's a lot of angry Karens there. I'll say that.
I was very surprised at. I guess I thought there was a line. I thought there was a line, and what I've learned in 2020 is, again, if you practice desensitization, if you practice not caring, if it doesn't directly affect you, it gets easier and easier to not care. And I try to understand the pathology of people. So I'm trying to understand, how do you reconcile the two? How do you say this nation was divided, or this nation was united, and we should be one? We should be coming together. When you live a life, Your life walk is about separation and isolation and individualism. This is one thing that I'm still working out on my boards in the back. Like how does that mindset work? You know, you've probably seen a couple of those shows, Criminal Intent or Criminal Minds. I try to figure that out about people. How do you do both? How do you preach to me? Stand by that flag. Don't you kneel. We must stand united. When you live a life of me and mine first, I don't owe nobody. I do what I want when I want to do it. How do you reconcile the two?
I mean, the easy answer, obviously, ignorance and whatnot, but I think that's a cop out because it goes back to what I said earlier. You know, innately, I think everybody's selfish to the core. And what you said, if it doesn't affect me, you know, if it doesn't affect you or your loved ones,
they're not selfish enough. I used to say this in business. I argue that let's take real estate. I'm a real estate agent. Okay.
I actually am plugged. But
well, I'm out the game, so you get your plug.
Just mess.
But that's good though. So we've both been in the game, and you're still in. So this will fit. A greedy agent might hide some material defects, so some material information from you. They might work it to where they get paid on both ends without you knowing. I mean, half the stuff I said is illegal, but they could sell you the house.
There's a lot of creativity.
Yes.
And gray line. Yeah, that's for sure.
So you find out later what they did to you, and maybe they even get away with it. But you're going to tell everyone you know what they did. They did it out of greed, but that's a low-level greed. A better greed would have been to take care of you because you're probably going to buy another house, and the people you know are going to buy houses, and those people are going to buy houses. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So
actually, wow.
I don't think the problem is greed. I think the problem, my personal saying is, you sell a man tomorrow, and the most you'll get from him is what he's got today. If you sell a man today, he'll come back to you tomorrow because it checked out.
Right.
I never sold a person a house with that. A year from now, the equity will be. I never sold a person. No, this is what it's worth right now. I never did that. And that always had people come back to me. To this day, people still come back because I didn't sell tomorrow. How am I going to sell what I don't have?
That's profound. I mean, that is, and it gets me thinking.
If you're a white business owner, you want as many customers as possible. You want the best employees possible. So honestly, and that's why we call it ignorance, if racists were just greedier, they wouldn't be racist. If they wanted to make the most money possible, they wanted the biggest business possible, they would find the best talent no matter what they look like. They would take customers no matter where they're from, and they would treat them however they got to. That's business. There is no way to be racist and win. And not just racist. There's no way to discriminate against valid customers for reasons that don't align with business impact. And you still can compete with the better functioning businesses. Now, that's what I said. It doesn't have any impact. So my skin color has no impact. You just saw Bezos do the reverse of that. A white guy wrote in angry that they're saying Black Lives Matter. I don't know Bezos' heart. I know this, the money, the math. He loses nothing. He gains everything by telling everybody that he happily let the racists walk. NASCAR just allowed the guy to drive his car. I actually just learned this recently. I last time I checked numbers for NASCAR, it was one of the most watched events.
Yeah, Dale Jr. and was number 8 back then, and
So
I
I've
haven't
actually
watched it.
been to the one, and what's the one that's like right on the state line of West Virginia and Tennessee? That big, is it Burlington or something like that?
It's
Starts with
not
a B.
um,
But I've
it's
actually been there.
Bristol. Bristol.
Bristol. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
know which side. You don't know if you're West Virginia. I was there.
Oh,
But my point is, they say it's people. Yeah, they say it seats 100,000 people. So the idea is, they say the attendance now is averaging 32,000. From being full till over the years, it's dropped down to 32,000. So people are like, yeah, they're letting them do it because the people, how it is now, that population is still big, but it's dying. I'm seeing black people now talking about watching NASCAR races.
Bubba Wallace. I mean, it's huge for the sport. And on your point, he's probably the only thing that could potentially save the sport. You hit on the NASCAR viewership is dying out. Very similar. I think a lot of them are. It's the same thing with the Fox News viewership, and that's why I still am.
I wasn't thinking you were going to go there. I thought you were going to talk about football. It keeps coming up every 3 to 4 years about the coaching
Oh,
graphics.
say that again, Ray. I lost
The
that
coaching
part.
demographics, it keeps coming
Oh,
up about the coaching
yeah,
demographics. So I thought maybe
coaching
you were going to go there for
coaching
NFL.
and executive. I mean, there's only 2 league executives that are of minority. I think there's one Native American, one African American. You're right. And coaches, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's not just football; it's all American sports. And I saw the NFL had proposed, what was it, maybe 2 weeks ago, about adding some extra incentive to hire minority candidates. But that's rather tokenism. It seems like tokenism to me. Um, in that regard. Now I might have missed something you said because I feel like
No, it's fine. No,
okay.
I a short answer, I don't know, because I claim to be an economist first on such things, and sanctions is not that sanctions have no impact and they never work, but they rarely work out how you intend. So I was talking earlier about the ACA. You had to get insurance and they fined you.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't intending that certain people like me would just pay the fine because it was cheaper.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So
Right.
sanctions don't always work how you want them to work. The same way incentives don't. A famous story is the snake bounty in India. The British had where the British were there, cobras were a big issue. So they paid the locals for every cobra head they brought in, to get rid of the cobras in the
Mm-hmm.
area.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they found out that the locals started breeding the cobras, then cutting their heads off, and then bringing them in for the money.
Damn smart. First off, I will say. I mean, talk about
Well,
entrepreneurship,
people are
but yeah,
people, though.
right. Exactly. Right.
I remember one example, a call center. I was at a business that had a call center, and they had an incentive of, if you average a certain number of calls an hour, you get a bonus. Well, guess what people started doing? Answering,
Right.
hanging
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. I mean, right. There's loopholes. There's ways to circumvent things. You're right. Now, can I ask you one question, Ray? Back to your original question on this topic, if I may.
Go.
Okay, and first off, I want to thank you for just letting me listen. A lot you said so much that are so profound, and I'm gonna think about, and similar to Cream's letter. But my question is, do you think how you hit on, you know, the different reactions to this COVID? Americans killing Americans in terms of COVID versus, let's say, well, my question is, do you think if it's because has anything to do with it being an invisible enemy versus, let's say, um, Al Qaeda did an attack on us that killed 120 something thousand Americans. Do you think it has anything to do with that, um, or is it simply just what you've said? I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on that. You're a lot smarter than I am.
I don't know if it's about smartest. We're just having hypothesis here, so I would throw a couple out. Um, I believe we as Americans, we have a propensity towards, if there's someone to blame, we like going that way.
It's easier. It's very easy to blame somebody. Yeah.
I mean, to the point, we will walk outside our front door, ignore all the local kids in our neighborhood overdosing, and drive to Chicago to talk about Chicago drugs. I mean,
Guilty.
that's literally what we do when we talk. You know, we will ignore the situation that we have in our house and talk about other people's dirty houses. So I will say that is a trait of public discourse in America, and it defines positioning. So, yes, it is easier to talk about MS-13 mistreating women in America or Arabs mistreating women than talking about the domestic violent rates here in America.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's a section of it. I also think we're seeing a profound extreme of a phenomenon. Um, Lady named Gladwell, I believe. Yeah, her first name's Malcolm. I always mess it up because that sounds like a boy's name to me, but her name's Malcolm Gladwell, journalist. She wrote a book called The Influencing Machine. And in this book, she talks about the history of journalism and publishing, like over the last 600-700 years, and how it's affected and shaped the world. And one of the parts she talks about is this idea that, so here's the example she gave. They actually did some research on this. Remember when Kerry was running for president?
That's when I first started getting interested. Yeah, I do though.
So there was a narrative. It's called the Swift Boat. It was a narrative that his time in Vietnam was all faked. It was stolen honor, that he was a coward. He got people killed. It was quickly discovered that there was zero fact behind any of this. Is they basically the actors that they hired, even the actors they hired, they were not in our unit. They basically hired actors to say this. But what was amazing was even after the public was told that it was a lie, it was too late. The public had got it into their heads that Kerry was this fake and this fraud, where to this very day, you were younger, but to this very day, I will ask adults 35 or older, 45 or older, was that true? And a good chunk of the room will say yes.
Yeah, just go on your Facebook timeline. I could probably find 10 in less than 10 seconds. I mean, that's how. I mean, I did a Twitter search a few weeks ago about. I'm fascinated with Dr. Fauci. I find his voice alone is captivating. I enjoy listening to him speak. I did a Twitter search about him, and there's more vitriol, more rumor, more falsehood about him than anything, any positive, anything, not even positive about him, but any kind of fact-based news about COVID or different, what the task force or whatnot. It was all vitriol. And that's the same. And we can give, pros and cons. We can give examples of different elected officials that, you have that the court of public opinion has the conviction papers already set in stone.
I think I'm using it properly when you say, when you make the comment of you can't unring a bell.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm thinking that plays into your question where, let's talk COVID and the malaria medicine.
Yeah.
Once Trump said it, it couldn't be unsaid. I mean,
Right.
Forget the fact he said it more than once. Once he said it, there was now an obligation to conduct trials. Because if you didn't conduct trials after he said it, that would have been all kinds of fodder for conspiracy. And look what happened. Even when they did conduct the trials and the trial said it was no good, no. And that's what in Gladwell's book, that's what she talked about. She talked about the fact that there's a certain thing about people where once they hear something and they've accepted it as truth, it becomes a part of them. And when you attack that item because it's untrue, they see it as you attacking them. And not only will they defend this part of them, they will create new things, basically new lies, to support it. So coming, how do we tie this back to public discourse, over social media? I will often say, attack the idea, not the man.
Right.
If you go in with this idea that no ideas belong to anybody, even if you think you're original, it's not. You're presenting your little battle bots. So we're just the geeks on the corner. Our ideas are the battle bots in the circle, and we're just using our joysticks, man. But even if your idea gets smashed, you didn't get hurt. Maybe your feelings, maybe your pride, but you weren't in there. That wasn't you that just got set on fire. I talk to people and I try to show them that, hey, you want to, this is great for business engagement, just engaging with people where you say things like, first off, I argue, try to ask questions instead of making declarations. You can often get to the same place. Instead of saying, you ate my last donut, you can ask, hey, did you eat that donut? Even if you feel you know the answer, one opens up conversation, one connects, because a question it's a request to connect if you think about it. But a declaration, that's very ambiguous. In fact, when people do that to me, I ask, because it is ambiguous. If you say, Ray, you did it, I go, are you asking me or telling me? Even how I tell you, I get these private messages from people about how hard it was being a white person and how they need to teach me. That's once they're done writing, or that's once they're done talking, that's my first question. Were you just declaring something to me for me to know, or were you engaging me for a conversation? Now, such people, usually what they do, they'll say, you don't have to say anything. I'm just telling you. And I'll dig deeper and I'll say, so you weren't interested in talking to me. This was solely to talk at me. And then they see where I'm going with this. So again, defense, it's almost like playing chess. They'll then say, no, I want to have a conversation. Great. So, you said a lot there. What was the main question? Or what was the main thing that, you'd like to talk about? Questions over declarations can get you where you want to go and argue a lot more efficiently at most times. Once you have got that, when you're speaking for yourself, it takes discipline, but you can still say anything and everything you want to say, but say, I argue that the way I see it, I'm of the opinion. And, C.S. Lewis talks about this in Mere Christianity, where he says one of the tricks the devil plays is he makes words lose their meaning. He talks about how back in the day, the word gentleman had meaning. It meant you had land, you had titles, it had a strong meaning. And then people started complaining about it. Like, no, that's not fair. That's not nice. To where today, I could go out and kill 7 people, but if I hold the door open for an old lady, she'll go, oh, you're such a gentleman. You probably heard stories of Dillinger. Dillinger was robbing banks, and women would be like, but he's such a gentleman. The word used to have used to have an objective meaning, like the temperature. The temperature is one number or the other. It got reduced to being subjective. Imagine if all thermometers said, she thinks it's cold at this point, he thinks it's cold, he thinks it's hot at this point. Could you imagine having thermometers that just said different people's names and their feelings about that temperature instead of an actual number? That's what we have nowadays with words, to where if you can just be disciplined enough to separate facts from opinions about the future, which are speculations, if you could just separate those three buckets as much as you could, it does help conversation go more efficiently. Now let's define more efficiently. Some people are going to flip out on you. They're going to be so mad at what you're doing. I used to say that you want to get a grown man to fight you, ask him 25 questions about himself. Just ask a man 25 questions about himself and why he thinks the way he thinks. He will be ready to fight you.
Probably won't take all 25 questions either.
Nope, won't take 25. I just make a nice high number. Honestly, average bar, average guy. He says something, be like, "You really think that? Why? Where does that come from? Tell me about yourself. I just want to know where that thinking comes from." That's enough right there. Just like, do we got a problem, bro? That's enough right there.
Yeah. Yep.
We have this belief that wisdom comes from experience. Wisdom does not come from experience. Wisdom comes from reflection on experiences. As we said earlier, if I have a 65-year-old white person telling me about a story in high school about black kids chasing them home because they were white, you've had 40 years of that experience and you never asked why. Zero reflection. Zero reflection. You worked the factory line and you were the only white person there. And even though you grew up poor, they kept making these jokes about you being rich and having it good. And you never asked why. Wisdom does not come from experience. Wisdom comes from reflection on experiences. We all know people that keep doing the same thing over and over that's not good for them. So clearly, experience is not enough. There's a reflective part. And let me not say we all know people. If we're truly honest, we all have been that person at one point of our life where clearly an experience did not make us become more wise. It took that experience 20 or 30 or 40 times before we reflected on the 20th or 30th or 40th time so we could then move on.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll be very frank and share my personal. I mean, some of the issues I've had in terms of, let's just say, with drug abuse. It's not like I just quit and then all of a sudden I've gave up drugs for good and turned my life around. No, I quit. You know how many times I quit, whether it be a couple of days, couple of weeks, even a couple of months. But I didn't have that reflection, like you said, which I love. I'm actually going to write that down and save it, if you don't mind. But you're absolutely right. What's that?
$2.99. It's going to cost $2.99. Just send it to the paywall.
Let me know your Venmo. I'll Venmo you. But I still owe you a drink. So, but anyway, what I'm saying is, it took me actually wanting to learn how to change and be better with that reflection. That if 2 months ago from today, I would be BSing you, I think, because it wouldn't be genuine because I didn't have that reflection. If George Floyd was murdered 2 months ago today, I don't know if I would have had as much. I don't know if I would have had such a reaction, such a pondering of it, and to change my little actions. But that reflection part is so huge, what you said, and like I said, my personal experience, and you said it perfectly. Everybody has, it's not just I know a guy. Everybody has had that experience, and we can count the point to many. But I just want to use my experience to compound your point. It took me at least 4, 5, 6 times where I thought I got clean, and then until I finally sat down and reflected on why I want to get clean, and move forward, turn my life around, make amends, etc. I know that's not necessarily specific to public discourse, but I just wanted to hopefully add to your point.
I think that actually, I think it absolutely fits. Again, what would we say? There's the things we don't talk about. Okay, so while I've never had an illegal substance issue myself, I will tell you about one that I struggled with a long time. And it's funny because I'm about to talk about this, but you know how I said those five: religion, sex, politics, income, and race? I was joking to myself the other day. I was like, I'm gonna say all five, but I have no intentions of ever talking about sex. I never said this, but I said it to myself. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm telling people the five that we were all taught not to talk about, but I have zero intention of talking about sex. So before I do, let me preface how this connects. Then I argue that the nastiest and the worst thing you see in another human being that you can recognize, you're only able to recognize it because you first saw it in yourself. Magnitude might be one thing. So if you recognize someone killing someone, that doesn't mean you've killed someone before, but you have harmed someone before. I have this idea that no matter how horrible my opponent is, I'm only able to recognize how horrible they are because I first saw it in myself. It's a reminder, it's a gut check to me that I I am no better. My actions can be better. And and what I'm about to say here is there's guilt and there's shame. So you can be more guilty than me. I can be more guilty than you. But shame, I have yet to have been shown a useful application of shame. Guilt I've seen use for. If you're guilty, change your ways. If you're guilty, change your ways. I have never I've seen people ashamed of their actions and change their actions. I have never seen someone who was shamed for what they are and they just became a different thing.
So you're saying it starts from internally? Is that kind of where you're getting at? That it starts
I'm
within
saying that
oneself?
when we observe people and we maybe even see them doing things that let's be more honest, things we haven't been caught doing. How about that?
Yeah, yeah.
We see them doing things that we have not been caught doing. It is wrong to shame them. It is wrong to tell the thief that that is all they are and that's all they ever will be, unless you just want them to keep stealing from you. um, Better is you are guilty of the action of theft, and we would appreciate you stop thieving. You coming back to the inner city, or not just the inner city, just angry people. I always I'm now sitting at those tables. You have an idea of some of the tables I sit at. I now sit at those tables where we all dress nice, we're having a nice dinner, we're out and everything, and then someone will say, these kids act like animals. These kids act like animals. They don't care about their life. They don't care about anything. They act like their life means nothing. You've heard this. They throw their own lives away. They act like their lives mean garbage. And what I always respond now is that's what they were told. Since these kids came into this world, they were told that they didn't matter. They were told that they are subhuman. They were told they were trash. Why are you surprised that children that you raise to feel they are less, that their lives don't really matter compared to other lives? Why are you surprised that they believed you and they live like that now?
That's very interesting, and you're right. By actions, by words, by on various any kind of all media all platforms. You're right. From the day one, they're getting ingrained. That's very interesting.
Eh, you know, you raised your future enemies. And when I say you raised them, your apathy and your abandonment, it forged them. Because not all the kids make it, you know? It's a meat grinder. They don't all make it. But the ones who do make it, what do you think? They're going to be your friend? This is some Count of Monte Cristo shit here. Their whole life has been training to come for you.
Yeah.
That I'll be honest, that's how I feel in a lot of times where it's like, okay, Ray, you made it. You're one of the good ones. I'm like, what are you talking about? I had 60 brothers. You cut down 59 of us. I'm the one that made it. I'm dedicating my life to ripping apart everything that you have built. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for your businesses. I'm coming for your children's businesses. My goal is that within 3 generations, no one will ever know you existed. I have said this to people. I have said, I watched what you did. I seen what you tried to do to me. You shot, you missed. When I first came up to Kenosha for real estate, let's just say this place a little wild, wild west. FBI kind of cleaned things up, but it's pretty grimy around here with the way banking was done. But yeah,
Still a little bit of old boys club, but what are you gonna do?
I'll take Old Boys Cub over what it was. I got to give
Fair
Kenosha
enough.
credit. It's cleaned up.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Like
I
I
would agree.
said, you know, we had a lot more title companies back in those days. It was different, trust. And but some of those people that tried to shut me down, once I stayed standing, now they want to be friends.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm a drink your drink if you're buying. But I never understood the silliness of it. It's like, we're not friends. I mean, I'm an ex-military guy, so I can have dinner with my enemy, but we're not friends. I'm an idiot to think we are. Um, I don't understand how people can mistreat people. And then if those people survive, they think it's going to be good. It's like, again, the past doesn't affect today. So if you truly wanted people to value their lives, you value their lives. That's the easiest thing you can do. Value a person's life if you want them to. But if you make it clear that to those kids, that those kids are not as valuable as your kids, don't act surprised when those kids act a certain way with your kids. They're going to do that. They're don't act surprised. If you tell someone that they are less than you or trash, don't act like when they find out you lied to them that you guys are cool. I see that a lot in America right now. I see an America that spent a long time telling me that I'm less. And then I didn't believe it. I moved along anyway. And now that same section of America that was telling me that I'm less, now they want to be like, why can't we all just get along? Like, nah, bro. Nah.
Yeah.
Now that they're not winning anymore, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing, like, put it this way, historically, Republicans on average were wealthier than Democrats. That's shifted in the last decade. A lot of people don't know that. Democrats on average are wealthier, more educated. That wasn't the case before. Everyone's got a hypothesis why. I argue that the definition of conservative has changed. That's my guess. You might have a different one. Me and my wife, actually, we tell people often that if the Republican Party actually stood for what it says it stood for in writing, we would be Republicans. I mean, look at our, for our income level, for what we have, that's the party we should be in. If they actually did those things, that's where we would be.
Sure. I understand that.
So, I mean, I'm not sitting there with the Democrats saying, hey, my taxes aren't high enough. I had 2 glasses of whiskey today. Unsat, fellas. Unsat. Jack them up. I mean, that's not the spirit here.
Yeah, right.
You,
Right.
so I'm looking at how much I paid in taxes, and I'm remembering a time in my life where that's how much I made in a year. And it's just like, I want my money back.
Yeah. Right.
Or, but
no, hey,
exactly. It's not coming back, so you just grab some more whiskey.
Yeah. Forget about it.
but yeah,
They lose your way.
to, it has to affect how you engage the world. I mean, let's talk about something less abrasive. Let's say you're a person that the world thinks is beautiful versus someone that the world doesn't think is a supermodel. Let's just talk about that. There is evidence that people that are head turners, that are stunners, the world treats them a different way. How the world treats you
Yeah.
shapes how you interact with the world. So if we know this, why would we expect children that we treat differently to act the same? If we treat different groups of people differently, why do we have the same expectation of behavior? These are just questions that I'm hoping allude to some of the cognitive dissonance on these topics. Let's see. Brandon Morris, what tables? All right, we can do this. He wants to know what tables I'm talking about when I'm sitting at. So I would say over the last, this is 2020. So I got home from military in 2010, started doing my thing officially, via investment real estate. So let's just say from 2012 to 2017. How about we say that? 2012 to 2017. This is going to be the frame of this story. I was moving on up, to the east side, finally got a piece of the pie. And I started getting inviting to social groups, to community groups. I'm joining everything. And I think I joined everything. If you can name it, I joined it damn near. I think the only thing I didn't join was the Kiwanis Club. Everything else I joined. Everything I joined, I was the only black person, especially in the business side. Only black person. There's a couple social things. There might have been a black woman or two, maybe, but definitely the only black male. And I told myself that this was part of. I told myself. No one told me I had to do this. I told myself I owe this to my people. I have this. You're hearing a lot of my mental frameworks out here, and I charge people for this stuff. So you're getting it all for free right now today. One of the frameworks I took from a book author. The book is "Accidental Empires," and Robert Cringely. And this book, he talks about a framework of there being three types of people. There being the commando, the infantry, and the police. So the idea is that commandos are people who do things that have never been done before in places that they've never been to before. Infantry does things that have been done before in places you haven't been to before. And then police do things that have been done before in a place you've been to before. So in business or society, the concept is your commandos, they're the innovators, they're the forgers out. Your infantry are the people like, okay, I saw what that guy did. I'm going to go somewhere new and do it. And then finally, your police. These are the people who build up society and maintain it and keep it going up higher and higher. So as a black male, I decided that I'm a commando. And part of being a commando is going to unknown places like these all white clubs and paving a way for infantry behind me so we can get routes set for those police behind us. So that's why I started going to these clubs, to pave a way for others to come behind me. I was built for this. My military time, all my experiences. I can operate in environments that are not conducive to my well-being. And I can manipulate those environments to become conducive to my well-being. It's a skill set. To the point I was able to thrive. But what I realized very quickly was that No one could thrive in these environments unless they had the training and background that I did. I started bringing in people behind me, and they just started washing out so fast. At first, I thought maybe I just picked the wrong people, but eventually I had to realize it wasn't about the people. It was about the fact that it was an environment that required you to have Army Special Operations training and a whole bunch of mental calm acumen. You had to have all the skill sets I brought in order to be there. You had to be better than these people for them to treat you like an equal. And when I say you had to be better, you had to be better at 28 than they were at 48. You had to be that much better. You had to be doing life better than them at 28 as a black man in America than they were doing as a 48-year-old white man or woman in order for them to treat you like an equal. And I finally had to look at the facts. Is that reasonable? That every black person that comes behind me has to be better at 28. I then started looking at it's funny, you kind of brought it up earlier. I then started looking at how they act with football players or basketball players. When they find out that this 22-year-old kid or this 23-year-old kid blew their money. All these idiots. They don't deserve the money. I would just sit there. I'm looking at a 50-year-old man on his third marriage, his second bankruptcy, looking at a 22-year-old kid saying that kid is an idiot.
Yep.
What he is doing is he comparing that 22-year-old black kid to himself right now. That's one of the privileges of the idea of the stance. So coming back to these tables I was at, I was the representative for blacks. And now to get there, you have to tolerate a lot. You have to be tolerant. That's a better way to say it. You have to be tolerant. You have to know how to speak. You have to know how to engage. And conversations would come up. And it usually didn't go well because the people starting conversations weren't ready to handle it. So one conversation that would come up a lot was, hey, Ray, you know, you're a level guy. You're pretty objective. What can we do to help out your community? What can we do? We're just seeing the problem over there. We just want to help with the problem, Ray. What can we do? At first I'd smile, or I say I don't know, or just care. After a while I got tired of that damn question. So I started saying this. I said, clean up your side of town, then write a book about it. And then hand out a copy of that book for free. So you're talking to me about black on black crime. You're talking to me about black abortion. Clean up your side of town for child porn, because FBI makes it very clear when they put out the report, that's a suburban white man's game. Sex trafficking, child porn, opiates, wives overdosing. Clean up your side of town. Write a book about how you did it. Title it, How to Clean Up Your Own House. Then give the black people copies of that book. That's how you can help us. The point I was trying to make was, how the hell are you going to help me when you can't help yourself? The arrogance of it. Do you remember that period of time out in Lake County where like all these rich white women were overdosing on prescription pills?
Not me. I don't remember, no.
It was just a string. It was getting so bad where they couldn't avoid it anymore.
Excuse me.
So it's like, how can you be sitting here talking to me about Chicago in your home across the street? Talk to me about that. These are the kind of conversations that would come. Now, the final straw for me, and I talk about this one a lot. I was with this one group, and this one lady got a couple drinks in her system. And she said, Ray, I see all this stuff you're writing on Facebook. You can't really believe all this stuff. I said, well, actually, I do. That's how I'm able to stay so consistent. And she said, well, you act like what we try to do is nothing. And I said, I don't think it's nothing. I just think it's different than what you do the rest of your life. So this particular organization, she's like, I've been a member of this organization for 17 years. For 17 years, we have been helping Black and brown kids, and we have been there 17 years. And this night actually was that organization's annual dinner. So there's a manual. We're sitting at this annual dinner. I know you know what I'm talking about, not the exact one, but these types of dinners where you're paying anywhere from $50 to $150 just to be sitting there eating $7 of pasta. It's one of those nights.
Yeah.
We're all dressed up. We're all feeling good about ourselves. We're handing each other awards. You go up and hand me an award. You come sit down. I go up and hand you an award. We're doing one of those nights. And she told me how she's been doing it for 17 years and all the kids they've worked with. And my response was this: 17 years. Why are none of those Black or brown kids sitting here as adults right now? Where do they go? Is there like a rapture? Like, what happens? Do you make them row out into Lake Michigan when they turn 18 and we just don't know what happens? Do they get a canoe? Do you like fire a flaming arrow into these kids you've helped over 17 years? She had nothing. And I started doing this with all the organizations. And one by one, I started leaving them. Because I decided that I don't care how many dirty Black kids you take pictures with, how many hot dogs you cook, how many backpacks you hand out. If over 15 years, none of these people's lives look something like your life, you're not doing nothing. I'm going to tell you this right now. Anyone who spends 2 years with me, and you can ask my mentees, any grown man who spends 2 years with me, I don't care if you just finished a bankruptcy. I don't care if you just got out of jail. You spend 2 years around me consistently, your life will start looking like mine. My life won't start looking like yours. You won't have an option. It is not an option to spend life around me, a person like me, the people that I run with. It is not possible to be around me and not live a life that more mirrors mine. Now, I'm not saying dress like me. I'm not saying talk like me, although it might be a side effect. You won't help yourself. I have had guys get out of jail and they hate cops. They hate all cops. Fast forward, they're like, I'm sitting here at the bar with you and some cops. It's just not an option. It's not possible to be around me an extended period of time and not be sitting there with a table where a third of the guys are cops, half the guys are ex-military. It's people of service interact with people of service. Politicians, people, past and present politicians, judges. It's just not possible. Like sticks with like. If you find someone that says, I hang out with Ray 5 days a week and I'm still sweeping floors at McDonald's, you know that man's a liar. I have actually told people to lose my number. There's a certain type of guy, he just likes being a hang-around. I don't got time for hang-arounds. If you hang out around me and you start saying how you can't pay rent and things like that, no, I'm not just going to cover you, but I'm going to put you onto some things. I'm going to open up. I've told guys, again, guys getting straight out of jail. You're talking guys done anywhere from 4 to 12 years in jail. Every contact I have, you now have. I put this in guys' heads. If you're with me, you're with me. If we're walking life, we walk life. I see a fakeness. And here's where conservatives and liberals overlap for me. They're both fake about this. They will claim they're helping people for extended periods of time, but their life goes one way and these people they're helping goes another. How is that possible? How is that possible? You even see it with churches. Oh, we're living life together. The hell you is. I see this new thing popping up around church. They call them life groups. They're not life groups. They're affinity groups. It's crazy when you think about it. Nothing in the Bible talks about affinity groups. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, and then Paul said, you guys beat up people? So do I. Nowhere does it say, you guys like fishing? So do I. Walk with me, fellow fisher brother in Christ. But even in the church, it's like, hey, let's live life together. What do you like to do? What do you mean what I like to do? Where in the, show me that chapter in the Bible. What do we like? What do I like to do? What if I don't like what you like? Well, what do we do then? We go find a different group? All right, brother. Sorry, I don't like fishing. Sorry, brother. Yeah. This is what we do. You'll have these people, um, they'll be like, I love everyone. I'm not a racist. I go, let's find out. Show me a photo of the last 3 4th of Julys and the last 3 Thanksgivings. What does that have to do with anything? I'll tell you what it has to do with it. Who you break bread with says a lot about you. That's a very intimate thing. Breaking bread. We don't say it that way, but breaking bread with people is a very intimate thing. So if you have, let me not say what you don't have. So who you choose to break bread with says a lot about you. So if a picture of you at Thanksgiving or 4th of July around a picnic is a whole bunch of different diversity that looks like the world, that's evidence, not a proof. It's evidence supporting the notion that you are an open person. But if every photo in your book is a whole bunch of people that look just like you, and notice I didn't say white, this goes anyway, a whole bunch of people that look like you, and maybe every now and then you got a little sprinkle in the picture, that also says a lot about you. You live in America. You have more freedom in America than anywhere on earth. If your social circle is devoid of diversity, you have made it that way. And this is not just ethnicity. If you're a professional and you have no working men in your circle, you decided that. If you are a working man and you have no professionals and no academics in your circle, you decided that. I was examining my own circle about 6, 7 months ago. And the question I was asking was, how many people do I know own a pickup truck? The number one selling vehicle in America is a pickup truck. I think it's like 40 something percent of all vehicle sales are some kind of pickup truck. So what does it mean if 40% of sales are pickup trucks? It's the number one selling vehicle, but I don't know anyone. And this was really the question. The question to myself was, how many people do you that you engage with on a weekly basis consistently? How many of them have a pickup truck? I went and did this exercise. I knew one person. All the people in my everyday social circle, I knew one person with a pickup truck. Shame on me if I pretend that I know America as a whole. And I don't know the part of America that owns pickup trucks. There's some guy hearing this right now, and he's like, how do you not know somebody that owns a pickup truck? And he's pissed at me that I use that little twang. But I'm just saying, I live in a world where you spend the hardest part of moving is finding somebody with a pickup truck.
Damn straight. Yeah.
That's the hardest part of moving for a guy like me. Finding you know how like how I'm sometimes the black friend. So when something happens, I get called because I'm the only black friend. Maybe that's what it's like for a white person when you're the only person with a pickup truck. So yeah, if you wanna know what it's like being black white people, get a pickup truck and then go to the more affluent side of town. That's what it's like being black. You only get called when people need to move some shit. That's when I get called. Ray, I got some stuff in my head I need to get moved. But you know, the difference though is I'm saying that I coming back to reflection. I chose to reflect on that. I chose to not say, well, that's not anything wrong with me. That's a BS metric that doesn't mean anything. I'm running again. We're not talking children, which, coming back to your earlier statement, I have high hopes for this generation, man. I really do. I'm loving what these kids are doing. They are abandoning the wars of their fathers and their mothers and their grandfathers. They are, it's like the bad thing about these kids is they don't listen. The good thing about these kids is they don't listen. All that crap that the previous generation was selling them. You've got to be seeing it every day. I'm seeing this flood on Facebook of that demographic in the Midwest. I'd say 45 to 60, flooding the wall with, Dorner. So there was a retired cop that was killed during the riots in I think St. Louis. So following George Floyd, there was a retired cop that got killed. This is like the battle cry for the suit for like the remember the different types of races we talked about? Not the sharp pain, the dull pain racist. They've just been killing Facebook with their pictures right next to each other, okay? And saying, why is this guy a hero and this guy doesn't get anything? And there's a many ways to go with that bad, horrible logic. But that type of person, that pathology, they will spin, and it's really magical. There's this one lady I'm following here locally, her and her husband, actually. It's I don't have a better word. It's magical. They spend a third of the day posting things about serving Christ. They spend a second third of the day posting a whole bunch of racist crap. And then another third of the day talking about how law and order is all we need. So, basically saying that there are no victims. It's just a whole bunch of people who didn't do anything. And it was very funny because one of the postings that this team did, they they posted this one thing where they said, it's a little known secret, but this is what it says. It's a little known secret, but if you don't commit crimes, the police won't mess with you. Now, again, think of the context and the timing. They chose to share this at this time of the day or this time of environment. So you know what it's about. Now, before I could say anything, I saw a lady jump right on that thread. And she started posting all the people that have been shot in their beds or in their homes, from our guy in Dallas to the girl in St. Louis who was sleeping. Just posted it.
Yeah.
Nothing. Crickets.
Hell, wasn't he even proven that George Floyd, like the bill wasn't even counterfeit? I thought I read something.
Well, what they're doing with George Floyd now is they're now bringing up everything he's ever done ever. So that's like kind of one of my jokes. So also this week there was a black business owner, He called the police. He owns a wine store, wine and beverage store. There was somebody misbehaving in his business. He calls the police. The police show up and whoop his ass. And he said, "Oh, sorry, mistaken identity." And so
Jeez.
my joke was, let's wait till we get all the facts. I mean, yes, we have the video of the police attacking him. Him saying, you know, "I'm the owner," then the cop hitting him in the face, then him saying, "What are you doing?" and the cop hitting him in the face again. Yes, I know we got that video, but let's give the cops a little room. How did we know that the black guy didn't steal that phone? The phone could have been stolen, The shoes, he could have stole those shoes last week. So, yeah, even though he didn't commit this crime, we don't know he didn't commit any crimes. This is the logic that's being applied right now. Now, while it's fun to make the little jokes about it, the sad part of it is when we do this to each other, we are denying a thing that we all want. We want to not be judged on our worst moments when it matters. All of us want to not be judged on our worst moments when it matters. So, why do you choose to judge everyone else by their worst moments? You're seeing this inability to give. It's this inability to give people the very thing that we're seeking and desiring. And then we all wonder why we can't get it. How many times have you seen someone on Facebook start a conversation talking about somebody they don't know? They're talking about someone they completely don't know. And then someone engages them and they say, "You don't know me." So such a person is saying they can speak on whoever the heck they want to speak on. But for you to speak on them, you have to have walked your entire life alongside their entire life. Otherwise, you don't know them. These bullhorns we've been given, I really just argue we just gave children, a whole bunch of children, machine guns with no training. Race is the current topic right now. And actually, I just realized I dodged. I did not mean to, but I dodged here. I was supposed to share something. So, sex. I
Ray, wait,
forgot.
Pike. I'm sorry, Ray.
Yeah.
As I'd love to learn sex from you, I do actually have to jump off. I'm very
Oh, you can go
sorry,
whenever, sir.
but
I still have
I
to
just
share.
I will just want to say thank you for letting me come on. I'd love
No
to come
worries, and
back
come back again
anytime.
too, because I'll be doing more of these.
What every is it every Sunday or
I am
no?
going to be doing twice a week, so it depends on current events. So if,
I'll keep an eye. Thank
goes
you.
through Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and the focus will always be on current events and engaging technology, social, digital communications, platforms, and how they affect humans, because we're still humans.
Absolutely. Thank you,
All right,
Ray. I
sir.
really
Thanks for
appreciate
coming
it.
on, though.
Anytime.
So I was just saying, I realized that I kind of cheated here. And when we were talking about things that we dodge and things that we're not ready to talk about all the time, we were hitting on the fact of you can do the same thing over and over again and not get the same result. I go to the military and I go to the Coast Guard Academy. And Coast Guard Academy is a military academy. And one of the senior cadets, he grabs all the boys, all of us cadets that are men. And he says, "Follow me, line up." So we all follow him. and he brings us to his room, and his roommate's there as well, and he says, "Okay, this is part of your training. You're at the US Military Academy now, and there's no women around here, so you gotta figure out a way to get by." So and he starts showing us all the free porn sites and makes us recite them. He says, "The only way you're gonna make it out of here." So, I'm not about to claim that's the first time I saw porn, but I wanna set that up for a society that's saying porn is part of life, porn is proper. And fast forward through life, even though my life showed me that that wasn't the case and it wasn't true, and even I got to the point where it's like, "Okay, this does not make my life better." Coming back to what we said about, wisdom coming from experience and not being true, even when you realize something's not good for you, you don't just, "Okay, I stop, I learn." It has to come from reflection. It had to come from a place where I said, "You know what? This does not make relationships better for me." Even the types of relationships I was having, I had this, you hear about some people that keep dating the same type of person, and they keep expecting a different result. Yeah, it's an actual different human, but they're dating the same type of people. They go to the same club, they go look for the same types of people, and it always goes the same way, and they act surprised. At some point, you have to reflect, and you have to say, "You know what? Whenever I go down that road, it ends up going somewhere I don't wanna go, so maybe, let's just give it a try, let's go do something else." And I argue that's like the beginning, at least for me, of, whatever maturity is, of being able to reflect on what you do. So, I even look at my history having conversations online. Um, y you know, when I first started out, it was just all fire and flame. I mean, I would just go at anyone and everyone hardcore, and it gave some things, but it didn't but I started reflecting on what it doesn't give, and that's when I started to change my look online, change my approach, change my tactics. I mean, even down to the point where when I first started talking the way I'm talking now, I, had a lady come up to me and she said, "I see what you're writing online, but I also see that you have liked the page for Fredericks of Hollywood, and you've liked the page for, Pinup of the Day." And she said, "I'm not telling you what to do, but I don't think that when that stuff comes up and it tells me that you liked it, that it matches where you want to go and the image you're trying to present." And it took me a couple days to think it through, but I ended up actually removing it, um, from my, I unclicked, I unliked all that stuff, because what I decided which one mattered more, the world knowing that I liked Pinup of the Day, or me reaching a woman with a mental civil discourse. I made that decision. What matters? I think that's a good way to sum this up today, where the hard right for the righteous white. What are you trying to accomplish? If 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 there was ever a black person in your life and you maybe wrote or said some of the things that I said have been said to me, what were you trying to do? Don't let yourself off the hook. Don't say, "I wasn't trying to do nothing, I'm just saying." There's a reason. Why did you need them to hear your story about affirmative action or quotas or how some black kids chased you home when you were a kid? Why did you need them to hear that story from you? And if you have such stories, why didn't you ask why at the time? That's your intentions. The other side of that coin is the outcomes. Did you get what you wanted? When when you told that story to the black person, did they, let's say you wanted them to see a different side. You wanted them to see that reverse racism is real, whatever you wanted. Did you get it? And if you didn't get it, if you've never got it, why aren't you reflecting on these experiences to gain wisdom? I don't think the problem is Facebook. I don't think the problem is that everyone has access to Facebook. I think a root cause to a lot of our disconnection is that we're disconnected from ourselves. We don't even know why we're doing things half the time. How I said earlier, ask a man 25 questions, he wants to fight you by the third one. It's because you're asking the man questions he hasn't asked himself, and you're confronting him with that fact. Why are you posting things? Why are you posting things and saying, I don't know, I didn't check this out, but if it's true, that's crazy. Why are you doing that? If someone sent you a meme saying your mom works the streets, you're not gonna post that and say, "I don't know if it's true, but if it is, that's crazy. I'm gonna be mad." So why did you choose certain things? And you went as far as to write, "I don't know if it's true, but if it is, that's crazy." Why are you posting that? We don't reflect, so we don't consciously know our intentions. We selfishly focus on the outcomes we desire, but we keep little to no record keeping on how often we get what we want. So I say ask yourself what you want, ask yourself what you're doing to get it, and then ask yourself, is it reasonable to expect that what you're doing to get it will get it? You don't control everything. You do control you. You don't control how people even receive your message. You do control what your message says. Even with writing online, people can misinterpret and see things very differently. So you don't control that part. You do control the words you utilize. You lose nothing by asking questions instead of making declarations. You lose nothing by saying, I argue, instead of speaking as if you're the absolute God. In fact, I say not only do you not lose anything, you only gain. There's a whole bunch of us saying, oh, we just wish everyone could be together and be one. A whole bunch of people. I call that a public level belief. I also argue that many people who are saying it believe that they want that. That's a private level belief. Here's my challenge to everyone. A core believer in this idea will learn techniques and tools to engage in proper conflict socially through conversation. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy your Sunday.